the picture, the real big St. Louis sports picture. It's BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN.
Both really good defenders. Obviously, one is a little bit more established and has more time out there at the big league level in Siani, but both of them, they have a similar game. At the end of the day, it's going to be a decision based on what is best for the long-term success of Victor Scott, because he has a future. He's going to help us win for a long time, and we're going to have to do what's right for him.
That's what it sounded like at the end of last year as Ollie Marmol was talking about what the Cardinals' plans are in center field. Everything is about what's best for Victor Scott. With Tanner Hendrickson and Bradford Bruns, I'm Brandon Kiley. Alex out today. He's feeling a little bit under the weather. Victor Scott's been unbelievable thus far in spring. Now, I want to have a disclaimer here. I'm the guy that tells you I don't care about spring numbers, and I'm not going to be some kind of a fraud and tell you now I suddenly do care about them, because I don't. However, I do care about the process. I care about stuff that appears as if it's going to translate to the regular season. And Victor Scott has made notable changes to his swing. He looks different at the plate. He looks more comfortable, more athletic at the plate. He is also a guy that is suddenly actually utilizing his speed on the base paths this year, which is something he talked about yesterday with Derek Gould after the game. Victor Scott so far in spring is 7 for 12. And those 7 hits are not just bloop singles the way that sometimes you can get lucky in baseball. It does happen. That's not happening with him. He's hitting the crap out of the ball. He has a double, he has a triple, he has a homer. He's already walked 3 times, and he has very few strikeouts to his name, only 2 so far this spring. At the same time last year, T-Bone, and again, I'm just going 1 for 1 this point in the spring, he was 2 for 12, did not have any extra base, or had one extra base hit. It was a double. 1 walk, no homers, ended up with 5 strikeouts at this point. He has 4 stolen bases. He had 2 last year. He also has been caught stealing once this year. Was not caught at any point this time last year. He looks like a different player out there. The reason I'm bringing this up is because, in my opinion at least, the biggest battle in spring training is center field. What is the plan in center? Is it going to be Newt? Is it going to be Siani? Is it going to be Scott? I felt like going into spring, Siani was the leader in the clubhouse. He was the guy that ended the season as your starting center fielder effectively. And he comes into this year as your starting center fielder since they haven't added a single player to the Major League roster. T-Bone, how has Victor Scott's performance thus far in spring, if at all, changed your opinion in that regard?
Well, for me right now, I look at it and I think Victor Scott currently is the one that's the leader in the clubhouse. And I know it's still very early in spring training, and I think we're 3 weeks from today, from opening day. Right now, he's the leader for me. And it's not just looking at the results, because I do look at those in spring training, and I overreact to them, as we know. But, I mean, you're right. His process looks better. He looks bigger just looking at him at the plate. He looks like he's got a better stance in the batter's box. He doesn't look like someone that is kind of off balance when he's taking his swings. And when he hits the ball freaking hard right now. And that's the part that really is catching my eyes, is the fact that when he is hitting it, it's coming off the bat really hard. It's not bloop singles. He's got extra base hits. He's showing the power for you. He's got the stolen base threat, which we knew all along that he had that in him. We talked about it. I remember last year. I remember who we talked to. I think it was Jim Riggleman about, like, hey, like, what's it like to have a Billy Hamilton on the team? And we had those conversations. For me, I think he's right now the leader in the clubhouse for that starting center field job. And I agree, it's the only battle going on in camp. But I look at him and I say, he provides more upside to that center field job. And though this season is not about technically getting answers like on him, I think even if he had another bad year, you would still give him another year leeway before you said, okay, we now have to figure out what we actually have in Victor Scott.
Yeah.
Right now, for me, he's the one that I want to see starting on opening day in center field, just because I know there's offensive upside to his game. We all know right now they're playing long-term is not Michael Siani as the long-term answer in center field. The hope right now is that it's Victor Scott. And I kind of want to see it right now to where I say, you know what, let's get a jump start on this. In a worst case scenario, if it does go really bad and he does start to sink again, then we can send him back down to AAA to work on some things since he still is very young.
To me, this feels similar to like when the Blues had Texier in the lineup over Zach Bolduc.
Yeah.
Like, is there technically upside there with Alex Texier? Yeah. Would you like to find out if it is something that can help you long term? Sure. Do I want to do so at the expense of Zach Bolduc? Absolutely not. Like, one of those guys is very much, at least potentially, a part of your future. And the other one is, hey, maybe he has a nice season and we can flip him for assets in the offseason. That's the reality of what Alex Texier probably was going to be for the Blues this season. So now what we've seen is they're just fully committed to Zach Bolduc, as they should have been, but they slow played it to find out, okay, where are we at with both of these guys? Is Zach Bolduc really ready to take that next step? And the answer was yes, so they let him get this runway. I think you're going to see something similar with Victor Scott this year, where I think the Cardinals would like him to take that job and run with it, no pun intended. But I just don't know if they want to make the same mistake, if they view it that way, as they made last year, where they rush him based on performance in spring training. So I think he's the most impressive center fielder. I think he's the guy that they're building around in that spot. I don't really think they have anybody else in the organization that profiles to be that guy every day in the next 3 years or so, other than Victor Scott. So he's clearly the answer in that slot, the way that Dalibor Dvorsky is clearly the answer for the Blues somewhere down the middle, whether that's second or third line center. He's going to plop into that lineup somewhere, so you don't want to block him. I just think that they're probably going to end up going Ciani on opening day, even if Victor Scott clearly outplays him in spring training. And then I think they send Victor Scott down to AAA and find out, were these changes real? Is what we saw in spring training something that will translate to the regular season? Because last year he got his ass kicked not just at the major league level, he also was terrible down in the minors last year relative to his previous production. This is still a very young player who is pretty green, honestly, both in terms of how he performs in the outfield and also at the plate. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world if in a transition season he spends a month in AAA to find out if these changes are real, so he doesn't get his teeth kicked in again and have another season similar to last year where you end up having to make in-season adjustments on the fly.
And it's funny because, like, I come from the opposite side of that. I think because it is a transition year, it's okay to have him take some lumps at the big league level and honestly give him a decent amount of runway. And, like, I don't think he's going to be a Jackson Chourio, for example, but that's what Milwaukee did last year, was they brought Jackson Chourio with the big league squad. He ended up not playing well very early on in the season, and rather than saying a month in, you know what, maybe AAA is the best route for this, they said, he's going to stick up here, he's going to work with our major league staff, and we're going to see if we can turn this around here. And he ended up turning around and helping them win the division. I think because you are in a transition year, and it's one of the very few opportunities that I think this organization is going to have to go through one of these years before they get back to whether they want to call it a winning window or they get back to really pushing again, I think this is the perfect time to be doing this, to say, hey, as long as this continues in spring training, as rosters start to get cut down, you start to see more major league pitching in these games, he continues to hit, he continues to look competitive at the plate and continues to hit the ball hard and looks like everything you're looking at isn't a fluke. To me, I say bring him up, start him on opening day, and keep him here for at least probably 2 months just to see if he can recover, if there are any lumps that do occur.
I'm good with it as long as they think that's what's best for his development. This season for Victor Scott is all about, and I think it goes back to Ollie's quote there, it's all about what's best for him. I think at times in the past, the Cardinals have treated prospects as if what's best for the Cardinals, what is best for us as an organization. And they decided, hey, Dylan Carlson, what's best for us is if you're ready to go now. Hell or high water, you're ready now. Jordan Walker, what's best for us is for you to be a part of our opening day roster because we don't want to pay somebody to be in right field on opening day. So guess what? Even if you have a terrible second half of spring training, which is probably more telling than what happens in the first half when pitchers are trying to like work on new pitches. Yeah. We don't care. We're going to send you onto the opening day roster, and then you have this like weird hitting streak, but we're going to send you down because we don't view this as being sustainable. These are the kinds of mistakes that the Cardinals have made in previous seasons. Hell, they made it with last year Victor Scott out of necessity. That was out of necessity. Yeah. I get that. There were a bunch of injuries that took place prior to him being the opening day center fielder, but you can't make those mistakes this year. This year it is truly what is best for the player, and then we'll arrange things accordingly. You have an obvious alternative here. I would rather watch Victor Scott every day. Selfishly, he is a guy that I enjoy watching play baseball. I think he's a hell of a lot of fun. He's got a great personality, good dude to talk to in the clubhouse. I'd rather him be here in St. Louis. But if that's not what they view as the best thing for him, do not force it. Do not make the same mistake that you had to make last year out of necessity when it is not a necessity this year. My question for you, T-Bone, related to this and related to the injury that we saw, hopefully not a long-term injury, but we don't know yet. the injury that we saw yesterday with Jordan Walker, got to thinking for myself, who are the players that this team needs definitive answers on this year? Because I don't think that is Victor Scott. Victor Scott's got some runway here, whether it's this year or next year. He's got some time to truly establish himself as the starting everyday center fielder. Who do they need to get answers on, though, sink or swim, going into the 2025 season, in your opinion?
So for me, the position player side, it is Walker and Gorman from their development side of what they look like at the plate. And then it's not so much what he looks like at the plate, it's more just staying healthy. It's Nootbaar. I think those are the three position players that you really have to get answers on if you're the St. Louis Cardinals, because once you get into the Chaim Bloom era, he can be ready to pivot if these guys aren't the answer. You know, if Gorman's not that guy, maybe we figure out what to do with him. Maybe he's part of a trade package. Maybe some team will value a left-handed, pure power hitting bat. You know what? Walker's not the guy. Okay, now it's time to abandon the idea that he's our starting right fielder moving forward. Same can be said for Nootbaar and left. If you want a position or a pitcher, I think Graceffo's a guy that's in this category as a pitcher. To me, they've got to start getting answers on what he's going to be long-term in the organization, whether that's a bullpen arm this year, maybe a starter when we go into 2026. But to me, he is stuck in a spot where it is, okay, we finally got to figure out what we have in this guy, because he's getting older and he's getting older fast, and he's done everything he needs to do at AAA.
Would you throw Herrera into that mix too, over 162, as far as seeing more than just a sample size, middle of the order? Yeah, exactly.
That would be my addendum. I would say, do I need to find out what he is at the plate? No, I've got some time on that. There could be a position switch there. He could be a DH full-time. He can move to first base. I know they're kind of clogged there, but you can figure that out as you go along. As a catcher, I think this is the year that it is sink or swim time for Ivan Herrera behind the plate.
Right.
So I would add him, Walker, Newt, Gorman. I think that's it, though. I think those are the four if you want to throw them out there. I don't think there's anybody else that I view it that way. Not even Graceffo. Because Graceffo next year could once again go back into the bullpen and be like, okay, we'll try this again with a bullpen arm, see if he ends up sticking there. Maybe McGreevy in the rotation. But I think you could do that as well again next year, because he's not out of options this year. So you can send him down to AAA and see what he looks like down there and hopefully continue the development. But I think it's just those four. I think Gorman might be the number one player, though, in this regard. Because, dude, if it doesn't work this year, if he ends up going south, J.J. Weatherholt's coming for your job. And if it ain't J.J. Weatherholt, it's Brendan Donovan. And if it ain't Brendan Donovan, it might be Thomas Saggese. Like, you have so many options in the middle infield right now, and a lot of left-handed bats. Hell, it might be just they go with Brendan Donovan at second base, and hey, sorry, man, Alec Burleson's a better hitter than you at the big league level. And Alec Burleson's your DH as a left-handed hitter with a little bit of thump. Nootbaar in the outfield has that on base percentage, and Brendan Donovan has that combination of contact plus on base. Yep. You don't provide enough with that pure power, all or nothing swing. We're going to move on from you, and we're going to go in a different direction. Like, he, to me, is the guy more so even than Walker, more so than Nootbaar, more so than anybody else on this roster. The guy with the most pressure to sink or swim this season in 2025, if he wants to be a Cardinal long-term, to me is Nolan Gorman. I think this is the year that it has to come together for him.
And even his role, not just take out like second base for now, but like when you think of like the identity of how you're building a lineup, everybody wants left-handed power for like, especially when they get to the playoffs when you're mostly seeing those right-handers. You can fill that role if he doesn't work out, right? We see teams go out and sign a guy like a Jock Peterson to a $10 million deal to just be a guy that goes up against right-handed pitching that could then DH. Or you can do it internally. And I think to an extent, it's not as much as Gorman, because I agree he's number one. Same can be said for Jordan Walker, right? Like if Walker doesn't pan out, you don't really have an outfielder coming, but you've got Koperniak, who would be interesting to see for a stint.
Yeah,
also, Donovan just shifts out there.
I feel differently about Walker because of the less experience, less time in the big leagues, younger, and he was always considered to be like this massive project. And you can still see that even today at the big league level, where there's just so much that has to come together that it was going to be a longer term project. Gorman was like, hey, we know what this tool is. That's kind of the only tool that's there, but he's got an arm and he can hit the ball hard. Hopefully that becomes a really nice big league player for you and you figure out where to put him in the field. But that's kind of what he is. And it's a question of, is this going to come together? And so far the answer is no, other than a brief period in 2023. We'll find out this year if he's going to be somebody that is a part of their long-term plans. With Tanner Hendrickson and Bradford Bruns, I'm Brandon Kiley. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. If you guys want to check us out on YouTube, you can always do that at youtube.com/101ESPN STL. That's where the Graveyard Chat is already off and running today. By the way, it sounds like a listener for BK and Ferrario, MD 2020, won today's TMA email of the day. So congratulations to him.
That's what I'm talking about.
That's why we were in at 11:07 today. Time check brought to you by Clarkson Jewelers, an officially licensed Rolex jeweler. Well worth it. Good job by you. We are going to be talking a little NFL. A big trade took place in the NFL. We'll get into that at 11:30. Questions and answers at 11:45, and a big 12 o'clock hour for you, including Chris Pronger, the Hockey Hall of Famer, former Blues defenseman. He's going to stop by the show coming up at noon. But next, it sure doesn't sound like the Blues are incentivized to make a move with Braden Shin at the deadline, but there is at least a rumor out there, T-Bone, that the Blues are connected to a couple of players that they could actually buy at this year's deadline. We'll tell you about that next year on 101 ESPN.
Text us anytime at 314-399-9646 on the Air Comfort Service Heating, Cooling, and Insulation text line on 101 ESPN. We're right back to more of it. It's BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN.
To a contending team. To a contending team. The interest is high in Braden Shin. It 100% is. But Again, be it contractual or the pieces that Armstrong would command and demand to even consider a trade like that might be prohibitive. And if it doesn't happen by March 7th, then guess what, guys? We're talking about this in the off season as well. So that's just the reality of the life of a veteran NHL player who's got a terrific contract and has high value in terms of what he could bring to a contending team.
That was Darren Drager on the show with us about a week ago now with Tanner Hendrickson and Bradford Bruns. I'm Brandon Kiley. We'll get to Chris Pronger, his thoughts on all of this in the 12 o'clock hour. We will also be joined by the voice of the Blues, Chris Kerber. So be sure to stay tuned if you guys want any Blues content. This is the place for you. Blues versus Kings later on this evening. Alex will have pregame coverage starting at 8:30. He's a little under the weather, hoping to get better by pregame coverage tonight. So stay tuned for that with him. T-Bone, I did want to talk a little bit on the latest with Braden Shin. Jeremy Rutherford had a really good piece earlier today. Everything that he's hearing in regards to Braden Shin over on The Athletic. And JR basically said, hey, listen, the Blues are listening because it's their job to listen, and they need to. And especially about 2 weeks ago, this team felt like it was out of the playoff race. And now suddenly they're right back into it. So things are getting more complicated for the Blues. And if they win tonight, I mean, they're right there in the playoff race with the rest of the Western Conference, and nobody's pulling away from this thing. And you have the weakest strength of schedule in the NHL the rest of the way. We'll get into that here in just a moment. But JR's piece makes it very clear. The Blues aren't just going to give away Braden Shin. They're not saying, hey, bring us your best offer, and kind of like the Kansas City Chiefs just did, we'll give you a Hall of Fame level left guard for literally nothing.
You upset about that one?
We'll get into that in a little while as well. If the Blues are going to trade Braden Shin, it's going to be for a massive haul. It reminds me so much of what they did last year with Pavel Buchnevich. Was he available at the deadline? I'm sure he was. Sure sounds that way. And if you wanted to give up, your left arm, your right leg, and a couple of fingers, Doug Armstrong might have been willing to talk to you about it. You had to give up the whole farm for him, though. And that's where we're at with Braden Shin. I'm sure the Blues are willing to move him for the right price. As of today, if I just had to go with my gut, what do I think is going to happen here? I think the Blues I think the most likely outcome is that they make no moves. They end up just sticking with the team that they have today and saying, you guys have earned the right to see this through. Nothing more, but you have earned the right to see it through with the group that you have right now, given the way that you've played over your last 10 games or so. That's my read on the situation as of today. That could change in an hour, but as of today, that's my read. T-Bone, where are you at on this?
I'm kind of in line with you. I think right now, they're going to listen on Shen, and they'll listen on anybody, but it's going to have to be an offer that just blows Army's socks off if he's going to make that kind of a trade, because I think they have earned the right to just kind of stand pat. You know what? You guys earned this. Go out there, see if you can do it. Now, we're not going to supplement this much. First off, we've burned quite a few assets already adding to this roster, but I think Army's just going to hold pat. I don't expect the Blues to be doing much, and I agree. It feels a lot like the Buchnevich situation, to where if there was a needle that was pointing one way, it's definitely leaning, I think, pretty significantly towards, hey, we want to hold on to Braden Shin. Just like it was, if we're being honest with ourselves. The Blues clearly wanted to hang on to Buchnevich at the trade deadline last year. Hell, they signed him to a contract extension 3 months later. I think what they're looking at right now is I think they are leaning towards holding on to Braden Shin. They want to hold on to Braden Shin unless someone just comes in, like Toronto, for example, and says, you know what, fine, first-round pick, second-round pick, Matthew Nyes, maybe even more added on to it, whatever Army's looking for, and then Army will be willing to make that move. But I think it's clear. They believe that this was a playoff team going into the year, which also adds to this incentive of, let's just hang on to this right now. They've clearly figured out a way to mesh together. They're playing under Jim Montgomery's system, and they've finally been able to really implement what Monty wants to do. Why should we start to break this thing up when they finally are gaining momentum? Let's give them a chance.
If you wanted to dream a little bit on what the Blues are going to do, there's some speculation out there, and I have no idea how much credit to put into some of these things. This is silly season in the NHL, but I want to put that out there to have a full disclaimer on what I'm about to say. There's some discussion from the fourth period that the Blues at least might be interested in Owen Power and or Bowen Byram. If you wanted to make a move at the deadline, that's the kind of move that I think they'll make. I don't think they're going to go out there and add a 33-year-old center who can help them the rest of the way and then leaves in the offseason and they sent out a future second or third-round pick in return for him. I don't think that really makes sense for them. If the Blues are going to make a move, I think it's something that helps them for the rest of this season and beyond. I think it is somebody that they could at least convince themselves this guy makes sense for us for 2026 and 2027 and 2028. Those are players that could potentially fit into that bucket. So that's the way I see them adding. At this point, the only way I see them subtracting is if it's something similar, where a team is willing to give you a piece that is already NHL ready and will be a part of your roster for the next 5 to 7 years. That's it. If you're not getting that in return for Braden Shin, I don't see a scenario in which they go ahead and get rid of that guy.
Yeah, I agree. And to that extent, it's almost to where it would almost feel like buying and selling if you traded Shin, because you are buying a younger piece that fits into the core that is here for the long term. I agree. I don't think they're out there looking for any kind of older rental, someone that just comes in for a year. I think they are looking for pieces that would fit with them for multiple seasons, that would fit at the NHL level. That's kind of been what Army has intended when he's even like this past offseason. I think it was at the first press conference of the year. He said, hey, we're done with asset accumulation. We're looking, if we're adding anything, it's looking for pieces that fit with the core in our time frame. And I think he stuck to that this season. Now, Fowler was an addition where it was, hey, we almost needed a body to come in here. That one's just a little different, but it ended up being a great addition as well. I think you're right. I think if they're going to be adding, it's going to be someone that's young, that's cost control, that's with them for a couple of seasons.
Now, in the YouTube chat, we had Andy who says, why more left-handed D-men? Isn't there already a logjam on that side? That's my thing. It's why I don't know how much stock to put into rumors like this. I agree. Yeah, I don't know that makes a ton of sense unless they're very comfortable with the idea that one of their left-handed defensemen can play on the right side. But Cam Fowler's already over there, and at least for the next year, I think he's going to be somebody that plays with Colton Parayko. And I guess maybe Broberg could kick over to the right side. We've seen some of that this year, not a ton of it. But beyond that, I don't see it. I don't see the fit there, so I don't know that it makes a ton of sense. I do think that the Blues could use another defenseman. I think that long-term, it's one of my biggest questions for them is where is that right-handed defenseman in your top four coming from? And how long is it going to be before you get there? But that would be my biggest question is how do you see those two players, whether it's Power or Byron, how do you see those guys fitting into your long-term plans? I don't necessarily see that for the Blues.
Yeah, I don't either. That one is one of those to where doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. I don't know why you would go out and make that move. And if Army's making any addition, I mean, I think we're all on the same page. It's probably third-line center or someone that takes over second line and bumps Shen down. But at this point, I don't think why would you do that when you've got that Shen, Holloway, Kyra line working so well together. So I don't know what to make of these reports of them being quote-unquote interested in a defenseman.
All right, last thing that I wanted to get to here on the Blues, they right now are basically a couple of points out of the postseason picture in the wild card. They do have one thing going for them, and this is something that JR mentioned in his article. I was texting with JR about it last night. If you're excited about the Blues, if you're optimistic about their chances of getting into the postseason, it really comes down to this. Two things. One, they're playing better, and two, their schedule the rest of the way. According to Tankathon, which is just one of my favorite websites on the internet, it's perfectly titled. I love it. According to them, you have the weakest remaining strength of schedule in the entire NHL. There's nobody that has a weaker remaining strength of schedule than the St. Louis Blues. So far this year, the Blues haven't done a great job against the weak teams on their schedule. If you're looking at teams below 500 on the season, you're 12-8-2 against them. But under Monty, you're 7-4-1. So you've done much better against the weaker teams on your schedule, taking care of business in that regard under Jim Montgomery than you were prior to him being hired. That's the thing that you've got to do. Take care of business against the weak teams. Even if you go like 500 against the legit contenders, including the Kings, who you're playing tonight, it's teams like the Ducks that are on your schedule a couple of nights from now. You have to win those games with regularity. I'm not saying anything that's breaking news, but in the past, especially over the last 2 years, that is something that the Blues have at times really struggled with. They go against these weak teams on their schedule. They don't take care of business, and then you look back on it and you circle those games and say that's where you missed out on the postseason. You didn't beat the teams that you had to.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because that's where I was going to go. Because when I looked at last year's team, that's where things really went south for Army. I think he talked with us, if I'm not mistaken. You know, the Blues played pretty well against a lot of the top teams in the Western Conference a season ago, but then they would have those games where they end up losing the season series to the San Jose Sharks, the Columbus game, which we look back on right before the All-Star break last year, which was just a game where they didn't show up. And this is the spot where it is, hey, this is where you take care of business because it's nice. Look, I thought they would be buried coming out of the Four Nations break. I mean, they played, what was it, like 6 games in a 10-day span, something ridiculous like that, and they were playing some of the best teams in the Western Conference. Okay, you did the hard part now. The hard part was staying afloat, beating some of the best teams that were in the West and the East to get back into this playoff picture and convince Army not to sell off pieces. Now should be the quote-unquote easy part, which is, hey, we play our game, we take care of these bad opponents, and you should really be able to pick up points. It is one of the top reasons why I think if you're Doug Armstrong or a Blues fan looking at this thinking, okay, we have a legitimate shot to get into the playoffs. Well, you got teams like the Flames and the Canucks who are still like flailing in the wind, still trying to figure out their identity as the trade deadline approaches. I mean, Alex said it. There's a chance the Canucks sell at this year's trade deadline, and they're right in the mix with the St. Louis Blues and the Calgary Flames for this last playoff spot.
All right, we do have an update on Jordan Walker. We'll give that to you coming up on the other side. Also want to get to some of your questions. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. We'll get to those at 11:45. But the update on Jordan Walker from Ollie Marmol coming up next here on 101 ESPN.
101 ESPN is powered by Kaufman Townsley St. Louis's injury lawyers. Call 314-500-5000.
Tune in this Friday from 11 to 2 as BK and Ferrario broadcast live from the E&B Granite Studios at the Centene Community Ice Center. E&B Granite, Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring. 101 ESPN Sports Center.
Blues back in action, West Coast style. Good afternoon. I'm Bradford Bruns, and this Sports Center update is driven to you by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Tonight at 1:30 or 9:30 rather on 101 ESPN. The Blues back in action for the first time since Sunday's 6-3 loss in Dallas. Puck drop against the Los Angeles Kings. LA has actually dropped 4 in a row. Pregame beginning at 8:30 on your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN. Also this evening on the hardwood, Mizzou facing off against Oklahoma in Norman. Mizzou looking for victory number 22, trying to bounce back after a weekend loss in overtime to Vanderbilt. The Sports Center update was driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
This is exactly where you want to be, listening to us. It's BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. We're flying down to Florida for a spring training report on 101 ESPN. Our Redbird Spring Training Report is brought to you by Rawlings. Visit the all-new Rawlings experience at Westport Plaza today.
T-Bone and Bradford, I'm BK. Got some good news on Jordan Walker for you, all things considered, from John Denton. Jordan Walker has no structural damage in his left knee. He's going to be shut down for a week. He's going to try to let the inflammation on the knee calm down. That is according to Ollie Marmol in his update today with the media. He did have an MRI last night, and it sounds like there was no structural damage on that. Ollie Marmol's quote on this, quote, "It is what it is. We'll let it calm down for a week, and then we'll ramp that baby back up, and we'll still have time for him to get plenty of spring training games in." Again, big thing here, Walker's knee structurally sound. He's just got some inflammation in there after stepping on a sprinkler cover.
Yeah, sprinkler head. Yeah. Like you'd expect at spring training, I guess.
If there is symbolism for what the Cardinals offseason has been,
that fits it perfectly.
The number one prospect that you want to get answers on, stepping on a sprinkler cover and twisting his knee in the middle of spring training, that feels like the one, considering what happened this offseason where the Cardinals thought they were going to have everything ready to go. They had the deal done for Nolan Arenado, which opens up everything else for them, money, roster, at-bats. And then suddenly, just like that, a team that was on his list is no longer on his list because they had traded Kyle Tucker earlier in the offseason. And there you go. So, yeah, the sprinkler head is nice symbolism for where the Cardinals are at.
I feel like we always get bad vibes from Cardinals spring training over the last 3 years. You know, clubhouse wasn't done a couple of years ago. Things really went south. Arenado coming to camp last year, blaming the young guys, and then we had a whole bunch of old dudes show up. Yeah, this is Cardinals spring training in a nutshell.
Said, this is positive news, all things considered. I mean, yesterday when he left the game, nobody had any clue what it was. They said it's his knee, which is never a good thing. And the first thought that came to both of our minds, T-Bone, was, please don't be Dylan Carlson 2.0. Please don't be Dylan Carlson 2.0. So all things considered, you have to be relieved at least about what this news is for the Cardinals.
Yeah, this is great news that there's no structural damage inside of that knee, and the fact that, you know, even though he is going to be off of it for a week, he's also got still plenty of time to ramp back up. As a hitter, it doesn't take those guys very long to catch up in terms of timing. They're the ones that are typically ready like 2 weeks in advance. Or 2 weeks before, than on pitchers. Pitchers are the reason spring training is like a month long. So, like, the fact that he's got, like, I think it's a week and a half when I was looking at their schedule left, that's plenty of time for him to get his timing back. This is the best news you could have gotten from the Cardinals in spring.
All right. Other player that's going to be out there today is Sonny Gray. He's making his first start of the spring in a Grapefruit League game. So, that's nice to see. It's always interesting to me to see how these veteran starters prepare during the spring. Lance Lynn did something like this where most of his starts were coming on the backfields last year, and people are like, is this dude going to be ready by opening day? Like, is this going to go all right? Sonny has his own process, and it seems to work for him, so it'll be nice to see Sonny Gray in action later on this afternoon against the Astros.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to see what he's been working on, especially because, like, I mean, you mentioned the backfields. reason he's been back there is because he wants to simulate things his own way. And he's really the first guy that I've ever heard publicly kind of mention this kind of stuff. Like, you hear guys do stuff on the backfield all the time. He's like open and like, hey, I got 3 outs in the third inning. Guess what? I wanted more pitches, so I brought in another guy. And we brought in at-bats. I think he's going to be fascinating to watch this season because all of his underlying metrics were like through the roof last season. And yet then, like, you looked at, like, the ERA was kind of inflated. He feels like he's in for a big year for the Cardinals to lead that rotation.
Yeah, I think he's going to have a massive season for the Cardinals this year. It's one of the things that I feel best about going into the year, and it's just a matter of...
You can't say that about a lot of things for this team.
Is the rest of the roster going to be able to be good enough for that to matter? With T-Bone and Bradford on BK, coming up in 15 minutes, we'll talk to the Hockey Hall of Famer Chris Pronger about the St. Louis Blues. But next, we're going to get into your questions. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers. Coming up next.
This is Pavel Bushnich, and it's Blues Game Day on 101 ESPN.
Blues Game Day is presented by Buffalo Wild Wings, the ultimate arena for wings and wins.
.101 ESPN has your chance to score a family 4-pack of tickets to see the Professional Women's Hockey League Takeover Tour on Saturday, March 29th at Enterprise Center. See an exciting PWHL face-off between the Ottawa Charge and the Boston Fleet, giving St. Louis hockey fans a chance to experience the top women's hockey players in the world in action. Get all the ticket details and get entered to win that free 4-pack of tickets for the PWHL Takeover Tour right now, either at 101ESPN.com or on your 101 mobile app, powered by Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers.
They are St. Louis. It's BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. You've got questions, we may have the answers. Maybe. It's BK and Ferrario's questions and answers on 101 ESPN.
314-399-9646 410-719-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers. If you guys have any questions, get them in right now on the Air Comfort Service text line or on YouTube at youtube.com/101ESPN-STL. Chris Pronger, Hockey Hall of Famer, former Blues defenseman. He's going to join us coming up in 10 minutes, so stay tuned for that as well. From the 314, guys, do you see the outcome of tonight's game changing anything for Doug Armstrong's plan at the deadline? I don't know where you're at on this, T-Bone, but for me, I think he pretty much has a grasp on where things are at with his team right now. Now, if they come out and just look terrible, maybe that influences things, sways things in one direction a little bit, but otherwise, I think by now he should have a pretty firm grasp on who this team is, for better or for worse.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think anything that happens tonight will determine what they do at the trade deadline. I think it was the previous, whatever it's been, 5-6 games from Four Nations that really determine what you do, because that's when they really turned it on. I don't think anything tonight, even if they came out and laid an egg tonight, I think if you're Doug Armstrong, you're still just kind of standing pat unless you get the Godfather offer from like Toronto for Shen.
All right, from the 314, guys, who gets squeezed out of the roster when Weatherholt comes up? Wynn, Gorman, or Donovan? This is something we were talking about before the show today. I think that's what makes it so important for Gorman to have success this year. If he doesn't, dude, Weatherholt's going to be here next year most likely. And that's the guy that replaces you on the roster. So to me, it's no doubt about it. It's Gorman that ends up getting squeezed potentially if he doesn't have success. Now, this is a good problem to have, but there is a scenario in which Wynn is what he was last year. Donovan just continues what he's been his entire major league career, and Gorman hits for power this season. That's when things get very interesting for the Cardinals. And my assumption would be that's when you get heavily incentivized to trade Nolan Arenado next year. And you find any possible way to eat some money to get him off the roster, and then you go with Wynn at short, probably Gorman at third, and Weatherholt at second, and that becomes your infield construction with Donovan playing either a super utility role where he's starting somewhere every day, or he's just starting outfielder somewhere.
Yeah, I would agree. If Gorman doesn't have a good year, he's the one that gets squeezed the most out of all of this. If he does have a good season, you almost then do have to trade Arenado so you can't create all those spots. The other guy that would get squeezed from this, unless I'm missing some way for him to get in the lineup, he's getting squeezed Weatherholt's not going to be here this year, and he's getting squeezed already, is Burleson.
Yeah.
I don't know how Burleson fits into the plans. Then same with like a Thomas Saggese. Like those three guys are the three that suddenly you look at and go, okay, what are their roles going to be on the big league squad when Weatherholt gets here, and even if Gorman does or doesn't have his struggles.
All right, from the 314, guys, which pending free agent would you like to see the Blues give a contract extension to? Also, would you give Fowler a couple-year extension this offseason? Pending free agent that I would be most likely to give a contract extension to is probably Ryan Suter.
I agree.
I would just, and it doesn't have to be a massive extension, give him the same contract that he did this year, see what it looks like next year. I'd be totally fine with that. Fowler contract extension, no, I would not do that. I would wait, see what it looks like, and play the process out. Hopefully he's still great by the end of next year, and if he is, then we can talk about it. But for right now, yeah, no, man, I'm good. I'm not making the mistake that I did with Justin Falk, that I made with Nick Leddy. I'm just going to let this process kind of play out.
Yeah, to an extent. Yeah, I agree. On Fowler, I would not do a contract extension with. I think of the pending UFAs, I would lean towards Suter. Even Fox, I would bring back Fox on another 1-2 year deal when he hits the market. He's not going to cost you a ton. He comes in, and as we've seen, that fourth line, it doesn't do much offensively, but it has an identity, and it is a line that the Blues can rely on.
All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. From the 636, guys, City has scored as many goals as Tanner has dates this year. Yikes. How do each of those entities find more success? T-Bone, I think you're a soccer guy, and you are also the man that has been labeled as a
just like
zero-date
the
performer
soccer
this
team,
year.
My expected dates for has been looking very good, just like the expected goals for City. We're just not converting at this time.
I don't know that the expected goals for looked good for City last week.
Okay, last week it did not.
I don't think that's true.
Last week they just got dominated. Like, there was no doubt about it. They just got caught pinned back the entire game, and they never found a way to get up the field. So where they go from here, I don't really know, because their new head coach is more defensive minded than Carnell was. Like, Bradley Carnell was essentially like, we're gonna blitz you the whole time, and if you beat us, you beat us, but our hope is you turn the ball over, and that leads to offense.
Yeah, fingers crossed, goalie's great.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Hopefully Barkey saves the show. But I don't know what the plan is for City. I'll be curious to know, because I mentioned after their first game, like I thought they played really well. They looked really good. Their expected goals in that game were really good. And I said, okay, I don't know if that is all about City or that's about Colorado, who was young. It's also hard to figure out, like, what is this new expansion team going to be in year one? Are they going to be like what City was in year one? I think we need another 3 games, I would say, before we really get answers on, okay, is this team going to have another offensive struggle this season?
That was my biggest concern coming out of that first game, is it just felt like a trend from the previous year plus. Like the last month of their first season, they struggled to score. Last year, the entirety of the season, they struggled to score. There's a lot of explanations for this, but that's the reality. And then starting out this year, it was 1 game, but they struggled to score again. Now it's 2 games, and they've struggled to score. So I don't know, man. I don't know what has to be fixed. It feels at this point like it might be personnel as much as it is coaching or anything else, and that is a frustrating place to be. We have this news coming in from the NFL. Christian Kirk, according to Adam Schefter, is expected to be released by the Jacksonville Jaguars. He was hurt for most of last season. This is a move that's going to save the Jags $10 million against the cap. Christian Kirk, this is from Schefter, now becomes a free agent in an increasingly crowded wide receiver market. Tyler Lockett was also released by the Seahawks earlier today as well. T-Bone, Christian Kirk, a decent slot receiver, a guy that I do think can still help a contender if he ends up going to one. Where would you like to see him land this offseason?
So I think the Rams make a ton of sense for him, but not to have like my favorite team hat on.
Sure.
I think Green Bay makes a lot of sense for Christian Kirk. Bring him in. No?
I would not do that.
Oh, see, I think Green Bay
I think Jaden Reed is a better player right now than Christian Kirk, and I would just let him take all of the slot reps personally.
Yeah,
I think they need a legit alpha.
Yeah, I would be bringing in 2 guys this offseason if I'm the Packers. Okay. I think they need to really revamp that entire wide receiver room, as their running back has said. I think they need to bring in some new faces, and I think Kirk makes a ton of sense for them. That's the probably number 1 team that I would say is like my favorite for him. Baltimore, maybe. Baltimore could use another wide receiver. There's going to be a couple teams that are going to have their pick of the litter this offseason.
I would go Philly. Just put them on Philly. Let Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown take all of those reps outside. Put Christian Kirk in the slot. Let's see what it looks like. Add a little bit of speed in the middle of the field. I think he makes all the sense in the world for Philly. Another team that I think would make a lot of sense for him is Denver. Denver could really use that slot option. They've got Cortland Sutton on the outside. They need to add a running back this offseason. Add another, like, just legit 3rd and 6, got to have it across the middle type of a guy. I think Christian Kirk can be that for them. More yards after catch. Sean Payton, that's what he's always won with offensively. And their quarterback in Bo Nix is a guy that can throw it across the middle with regularity. I think Denver makes a lot of sense for him as well.
Boy, lots of options for Trevor Lawrence now. Brian Thomas Jr. and ...
Gabe Davis. They signed him to that massive contract last offseason. It's not good, man. They have made a ton of mistakes in free agency, and it's no wonder that they had to fire their GM and their head coach this past offseason.
Is Harrison for Arizona doesn't play in the slot, does he?
No, he's mostly been outside.
Yeah. Arizona needs another guy, too.
He was there previously. Just go back home.
Yeah, why not? They're the team that I'm keeping an eye on for this wide receivers market. You just read off Lockett's there. Devontae Adams is there. I think Kupp's going to get out of that here shortly. There are a lot of big names. Now, some of them are at the back ends of their career. Arizona, I think, is going to be a player for one of them. I would say that Kirk would be the one that makes maybe the most sense for them right now.
For sure. With Tanner Hendrickson and Bradford Bruns, I'm Brandon Kiley. Coming up in about 15 minutes, we'll dive into some NFL quick hitters, a couple more thoughts on the news in the NFL over the last couple of days. But next, Chris Pronger, Hockey Hall of Famer, former Blues defenseman, joins us here on BK and Ferrario.
101 ESPN is your home for Blues hockey. And every month during the season, you can register to win tickets to an upcoming Blues game. Enter to score free Blues tickets now at 101ESPN.com or on the 101 app.
Brought to you by Ted Drew's. Real custard, real tradition. Ted Drew's. It's St. Louis.
Febreze. It's a classic odor tale. You fried fish for dinner, cleaned up, but the smell is still in the house. And the neighbors are coming over for game night. They're on their way. And then you spray Febreze Air Mist. Febreze Air starts working instantly to fight even your toughest odors, so you go from fish to fresh like that. Now, all you have to worry about is Pam cheating at charades.
Breathe happy, Febreze, la 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 la.
When it comes to great deals on tax prep, Jackson Hewitt isn't holding back, and neither is this commercial. Their offer is so big, it has to be said with Reverb. Expert tax prep for $149 or less. It's a deal so spectacular, it needs a symphony, some explosions, and a clock ticking, because this offer, $149 or less. And soon, one expert tax prep for $149 or less. Try Jackson Hewitt today and save. Whew. Limited time offer for new clients on federal returns. Participating locations only. Terms at jacksonhewitt.com/149.
Now listen to 101 ESPN On Demand. Get caught up on all our shows and podcasts at 101ESPN.com or on the 101 mobile app. 101 ESPN podcasts are presented by the Schaefer Door Company. WXOS HD1 East St. Louis 101 ESPN is driven by Brown and Crouppen Law Firm. Giving you the picture, the real big St. Louis sports picture. It's BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN.
Cairo to the far wing, they score! All the way to Parayko, and Parayko buries it for the Blues. And he's on fire, and he ties the game 1-1, 10:23 to go.
Colton Parayko's putting together an absolutely absurd season. We're going to talk it over with a player that he has been compared to a million different times in his NHL career, and that's Chris Pronger, Hockey Hall of Famer, former Blues defenseman. He's going to join us here in just a couple of minutes, but I wanted to spend a couple of minutes with you, T-Bone, talking a little bit about what Colton Parayko has been able to do so far this year. Through 60 games, he has 15 goals, 34 points, and is a +8 on the ice this year. He's averaging almost 24 minutes of ice time per game. That puts him on pace this year for 20 goals, 45 points, and a +11. So if you just made that super simple, right, the even numbers, 20 goals, 45 points, +10 on the ice. Here are the defensemen that have finished a season with those numbers in the past decade in the NHL. Cale Makar.
He's pretty good.
Zach Werenski, who, as we've learned in the last 2 weeks, he's very good. Roman Josi, he's done it twice. Dougie Hamilton, Victor Hedman, Morgan Riley, Brent Burns, end of list.
That's a pretty good list.
Those are legit number one defensemen in the NHL, and Morgan Riley, who, you know, it is what it is. Colton Parayko, what he's done so far this season is emerge as not just a top pair defenseman. He is the number one defenseman that we said when Alex Pietrangelo walks out that door, you're immediately looking for the next Petro. He doesn't go about it the same way that Petro did. Petro was much better on the power play. He did things that Parayko can't. But Parayko also does things that Petro couldn't do. It's been amazing to witness.
Yeah, it really has been. And you know, I was skeptical. Alex has been telling us all along, like, hey, this is going to be coming for Colton Parayko. Parayko is a guy that is a number one defenseman. And I was skeptical of that, especially coming off the year where he started to deal with those back injuries. He's clearly healthy again. He's playing at an unbelievable level defensively, going up against some of the top lines and shutting them down. And also from an offensive perspective, I mean, like you said, it's all at 5-on-5. And that's what makes it really impressive, because that's when it's a lot harder. And even guys like Makar and them, they still do a very good job at 5-on-5. Where they really make up their points is when it's on the power play.
And they don't have the size that Parayko does to be able to shut plays down. Chris Pronger has been saying for years, stop talking about what this guy can't do. Please begin to talk about what he is doing. And Chris Pronger, the Hockey Hall of Famer, former Blues defenseman, joins us now on the show via the Callier and Thompson hotline. Prongs, we were talking a little bit about the development that we have seen thus far in 2025 from Colton Parayko. Now on pace for 20 goals this year, plus 10 on the ice. Prongs, to you, what, if anything, has changed from Colton Parayko's game that has opened him up to being this kind of an offensive contributor?
Yeah, I just see his awareness of when to jump in the offensive zone, and I think his willingness to shoot the puck. In years past, he was double clutching and he was passing up shot opportunities, and I think this year you're just seeing him let it rip. And that is allowing, a lot of action, rebounds, second, third opportunities off of those. And also, he's got a cannon. Use it. And I think that's allowing him to, score more goals. He's got the shot. He's got the wherewithal. He's getting himself into those shooting opportunities and scoring zones, if you will. So it's a matter of him now executing on those, and it's been great to see him flourish this year with his goal production.
And Prongs, when you talk about the NHL today, do you think to have success, you have to have a number one defenseman that brings this kind of offensive upside to the NHL game at 5-on-5 now?
Well, I think you need offensive production from your back end to be successful, and you've got him. You need Justin Falk to provide some offense. You get a little bit from Cam Fowler, but he's not noted as an offensive defenseman. He's more a two-way, steady defender. You look at their back end, there's not a ton of offensive production, as there has been in years past. And so they need Colton Parayko to take his game to the next level like he has.
Prongs, I find it interesting what we've seen from Parayko really since Cam Fowler has joined the team. It opened everything up for him, and since then we've seen the best version of Parayko in years. What is it about that combination to you that works? How has Cam Fowler opened things up for Parayko?
Well, I think much like the addition of Jay Bouwmeester, when he got paired with Alex Pietrangelo, it freed him up and allowed him to look to be more offensive, look to jump into the play more, look to find holes and seams in the offensive zone. Cam Fowler is a very steadying influence, very good skater, very mobile. So it allows Colton Parayko to feel comfortable jumping in and not worrying about, getting back on defense at times. And so he's just steadying influence back there. And it's been a great partnership for both.
Prongs, when you were playing, how much did your pairing mate on the defensive side of things, how much did that influence your style of games? Did it change at all depending on who you were on the ice with at any given time?
At times it does, absolutely. I think my time in St. Louis, I bounced around with a lot of different guys. I didn't really have one particular partner throughout any course in time, but in my stints afterwards, Anaheim, I played a lot with Sean O'Donnell. In Philadelphia, I played a lot with Matt Carl, the 3 years there. And so, you just gain rapport with a player. You have an understanding of where they like pucks and how they defend and how they like to defend, so you can support one another. And so you just get, not a lot needs to be said. You're so familiar with one another. And once you have that connection and chemistry with a defense partner, what you do on the ice becomes seamless, and you really don't have to read and react. You just understand and know where each other's going to be.
And Prongs, when you look at this team since the Four Nation break, they've picked up points in 5 of 6, 6 of 7 if you go back to their last game prior to the Four Nations break. What have you made of this team and the way that they have played coming out of the Four Nations to get themselves back into the playoff hunt?
Yeah, they played really well. They seem to be more committed to getting pucks deep, just being physical. The simple things in the game that anybody can do, they seem more willing to do. And I don't know if it was the break that allowed them to recharge or what have you, or seeing Binnington and Parayko have the success they had. But they've come back and they're playing with a renewed vigor and playing high energy, which is what they need to play to be effective.
A lot of that is from that top line. Their top line with Thomas is out shooting the opposition 42-23 since coming back from this Four Nations face-off. They are outscoring them 7-1 when they've been on the ice. Prongs, there's been some speculation that maybe Thomas wasn't at 100%, and Booch said over the weekend, hey, I wasn't feeling at my best. I can finally move the way that I want to now. How much does that change the outlook for the rest of this season if those guys are playing up to their capabilities on that top line again?
Well, I think it's key to their success. And I think if they can get the two top lines going at the same time, I really like their chances to make the playoffs and to potentially make a run with the confidence that exudes throughout the roster and lineup. You could see them going on a run, and there wouldn't be a lot of teams that would be interested in getting them with a first-round matchup.
And Prong, speaking of them potentially going on a run, I mean, trade deadline is on Friday, and there's all kinds of buzz around the St. Louis Blues, whether they're going to be potentially sellers or if they could be potentially maybe marginal buyers. When you think about when teams go out and whether it be make changes or bring in additions at a trade deadline, how does that impact kind of team chemistry, if at all, when you do make those kind of moves?
Well, it always affects chemistry. It depends, and a lot of times it depends on who's going in, who's going out. If you're trading draft picks for players coming in, it's okay, whose spot are they taking, and on, things of that nature. But with the names that have been bandied about, they seem to be a little more significant. Whether it be Shen and I've even heard people talking about Parayko. I'm like,
every year, Pronger. Every year, without fail.
No sense, but whatever. To each their own. What you're balancing. Getting maximum return with keeping playoff hopes alive, the product alive, in the sense that the players that are here and will be here feel like you're not taking anything away from them, in the sense that support and production, and really just trying to get a feel for what it will do in the locker room if, say, okay, Braden Shen, your captain, gets traded. What does that do? And, oh, by the way, he's got a no trade. So he's got to approve any move this year. I don't foresee him getting traded at the deadline. It would take, we've got, a couple days left here. That would, unless there's talks going on behind the scenes that we're unaware of, which a good chance there are. But, that would take a lot to see a player, A, your captain, B, someone with a no trade to get moved at the deadline. A lot of moving parts there, but you never know if you're getting maximum trade value. And also, as we've seen in the past, a lot of times when names are bandied about, it's a team that covets the player, or B, it is whether it's Doug Armstrong or somebody looking at what it's going to take for them to want to move the player or acquire a player, and then they do that in the summer. And maybe that either gets them more engaged in the summer at the draft or post-draft, or they move on to other players because it's too expensive.
Chris Pronger's a Hockey Hall of Famer. He's joining us now on BK and Ferrario via the Callier and Thompson hotline for just another couple of minutes. I did want to ask you, if you look at this team right now and what they have available to them, you mentioned think this team would be tough to play against in the postseason, given what they have with Binnington and net and the way that they've been playing with their top six lately. If you, Pronger, could add anything to this team at the deadline, what do you think you'd be targeting? Is there like a top six forward that you'd be looking for? What would you be looking for if you were in Doug Armstrong's shoes at this year's deadline?
Well, top six forwards don't grow on trees, and they're going to take a lot of capital to get. And at this stage of, if we want to call it a retool, I'm not sure they're going to be willing to pay the price that's going to take. Typically, you're going to see most teams when you're looking at, maybe it's a hockey trade, and you're seeing a good player at Team X go to a good player go to Team Y. Sometimes you'll see that, or you're going to see rental players moved at the deadline. Most teams are going to have more cap flexibility in the summer, following the draft. Leading up to the draft and then following the draft, they'll have more cap flexibility to take on players or subtract players from their rosters. So typically at this time of year, you're trying to fit players in under the cap. And, as we've seen already, players being traded to other teams so they can retain money to either get a prospect or a pick back, and on and on and on. So there's a lot of moving parts with the cap where it's at. But I think in future years, you'll be able to see more movement because the cap will be much higher.
All right, Chris, we'll get you out of here on this. I know you've got your business that you've been working on. You've been doing some announcing lately as well, some analysis side of things on the hockey world. What's going on in the world of Chris Pronger? What can we expect from you here in the not too distant future?
Yeah, no, I've been over the last 18 months just been building out a speaking platform, and over the last 6 months, been doing some keynote speeches for various companies across the country. And, as you said, been doing some TV work, looking at doing some more of that over the next number of years and trying to get more involved in that. And, maybe working on a book here at some point. I got my hand in a number of things.
Do you prefer local or national when it comes to the TV coverage? Because they're obviously very different, but what do you prefer in that regard?
I like national. You're talking about the bigger picture of the league and implications of, whether it's a trade over here and how it affects these teams over here, or signings or rules and things of that nature, salary cap. The macro view of the league, with obviously some micro moves with respect to what game you're covering and things like that. But the national side to me is a better fit.
Absolutely. Hey, Chris, we appreciate the time as always, man. Thanks so much for hopping on with us today, especially ahead of the deadline, which I know is busy season in the NHL. All the best to you and the family, and hopefully we'll talk with you again soon. Hopefully as the Blues are making a run to the playoffs.
Yeah, you bet. My pleasure. Take care, guys.
You got it. That's Chris Pronger, Hockey Hall of Famer, former Blues defenseman. Always enjoy catching up with him here on BK and Ferrario. Most of what he said there, I think, is what we expected. I did find interesting what he was talking about with the partner and how much that can open things up for you. I think it's something that we've talked so much about, and then when you get into the over-analysis in season, it's like you get into, okay, this is what this player is what he's not. Parayko's been missing that partner for really since that first season that they paired Nick Leddy with him. It seemed at the time as though he found a home. He found somebody that, okay, this works between these two players. And then the next season they bring back Nick Leddy, and it just never felt the same again. They never were able to recapture that form from year one, and they've been trying everything ever since. And now they finally have found somebody. We got the question earlier about, hey, do you extend Cam Fowler based on what we've seen this year? My answer to that is still no, but I've really enjoyed this version of Colton Parayko, and I hope, if nothing else, what they have found is this is the kind of player that we want next to Colton Parayko. Even if that's not Cam Fowler 2 years from now, that's the kind of player that you need to put next to him. And I think it means you don't want a young guy. next to Colton Parayko. Yep. Just have somebody that is steady Eddie, ready to go, and he allows Parayko to become this offensive player that he is this year.
Yeah, and we've seen when Parayko's at his best. I mean, you mentioned Letty when he was working with him well, and now Fowler. I agree. It's part of the reason why I wouldn't extend Fowler just yet, because of the fact that we did see Parayko. Parayko goes through spurts because he is such a good defenseman where he can make it work with most of his pairing partners. But when you get to the long-term success, you still haven't seen that. You still haven't found the answer. And I think you're right. Even if it's not Fowler, hopefully it's this style of player that you're looking at. Because I remember at one point the Blues seemed to think that it was a puck, more of a, I don't know if it was a smaller defenseman, but a puck-moving defenseman. Because I remember when we had a conversation with Army a couple years back, we thought he originally was talking about, I think it was Perunovic, if I'm not mistaken, of, hey, they want this puck-moving, offensive-minded.
Those were the two guys that he brought up.
And we thought that, okay, that's what they were looking for was, hey, we want that guy to be the offensive-minded defenseman that gets up in the rush, helps with getting the puck out of the zone, and then Parayko's more at the stay-at-home guy. I almost feel like that is, to an extent, almost flipped to where Parayko's now the guy that gets more up in the rush, and you're looking more for that stay-at-home defenseman to pair with him.
We have a big piece of news coming out of the NFL. We'll get into that, and we'll react to a trade that was taken or that took place earlier today, as well as we dive into some NFL quick hitters coming up next year on 101 ESPN.
It's time for another moment in Blues history.
On this date, back in 1998, the Blues would defeat the Montreal Canadiens with a 4-0 shutout. Jamie McLennan would get the shutout, stopping all 17 shots from Montreal. Jim Campbell would get a power play goal, as well as Brett Hall. Kelly Chase scoring at even strength, and Pascal Rayome in the third period. Also in this one, our own Jamie Rivers picking up a 2-assist game.
This date in Blues history was powered by Classic Air Care, making people comfortable since 1926. For all your HVAC needs, ClassicAirCare.com.
.101 ESPN is your home for Blues hockey. Check out either the 101 mobile app or 101ESPN.com for your chance to win a signed puck autographed by Blues center Oscar Sundquist. Get entered to win that Oscar Sundquist signed puck right now, either at 101ESPN.com or on your 101 mobile app. Powered by Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers.
We're right back to more of it. It's BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN.
All right, let's dive into some NFL quick hitters with Tanner Hendrickson and Bradford Bruns. I'm Brandon Kiley. Alex out today, hoping he'll be back in tomorrow, feeling a little under the weather today. The big news here just moments ago, according to Tom Pelissero, and multiple reports have now confirmed this, two-time Pro Bowl wide receiver DK Metcalf has requested a trade. The Seahawks have agreed to explore their option. Days before the start of free agency, the 27-year-old Metcalf immediately becomes the top receiver available. Adam Schefter chiming in on this, saying that DK Metcalf has 1 year left on his deal, would likely need a new contract if he were to be traded. The first place that a lot of people go, and this is not just me because of my background, is Kansas City, because DK Metcalf is a big wide receiver that runs down the field. The Chiefs don't have receivers that profile that way. The new deal means this is not happening for Kansas City. That's not something they're going to do. No chance. They're not going to invest that kind of money at wide receiver. If they're going to invest this offseason, it's probably in the offensive line. If you watch the Super Bowl, I don't think anybody will blame them for that.
Offensive line?
We'll talk about that here in a minute. Who do you guys think makes sense for DK Metcalf, though? T-Bone, you brought up earlier today, I'll throw mine out there first. You brought up the Packers potentially as an option for Christian Kirk. That's the team that I think makes a ton of sense for DK Metcalf. Yeah. He's the exact type of receiver that they're missing.
And there were reports, I don't remember when this was, but wasn't it like 2 weeks ago there were reports that, hey, Packers and Seahawks have kind of talked about this kind of
combine,
trade?
Yep.
Yeah, Packers do make a ton of sense. Another team for me would be like Buffalo. I mean, we talked about like looking for their big three. I remember who Alex brought up for them.
I don't think they can make them work money-wise, though.
Yeah, the whole contract looking for another one would be tough, but they make a ton of sense because Devontae Adams was who we brought up for them yesterday. So Packers, Bills make sense.
Patriots
Patriots
another one that I would throw in there.
Would be another one.
With Drake May, it would be a hell of a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah. What about Baltimore? Baltimore could use a big guy that they could throw.
I don't know if they could make it work either. Teams that have a lot of cap space going into this offseason. This is $40+ million. So here are the teams that you could probably choose from. Patriots, Raiders, Cardinals, Chargers. That one
could make sense.
Put a pin in that one. Commanders, Vikings, Steelers. Put a pin in that one. Bengals, Jets, Rams.
Yeah, they won't trade him in division.
Good call. Bears, Lions, Titans, Giants, Packers, Broncos. Those are the teams that you're probably looking at in relation to DK Metcalf.
Pre-Debo move, Washington would have made a ton of sense as well, obviously. But you know he's been more dinged up over the last couple of years, but you're still talking about somebody with that elite blend of physicality and speed. I do like your notion, BK, of him maybe moving on to Green Bay, because think about the cast that Love has with whom to operate, right? You've got a lot of speedsters, namely Reed. If you can add that individual with the body size, the ability to go up and get it in the catch radius, I guess if you're Seattle too, do you really view Smith and Jigba as the ultimate answer long-term as the number one? He was great last season, but
I think he's a really good slot receiver.
Yeah.
You know, and like they need a number one receiver if they end up trading DK Metcalf. I think they're probably looking at it as, hey, we're in the middle of a transition right now. We're going to transition into whatever the next version of the Seahawks is, and that means potentially getting a second-round pick in return for DK Metcalf. That's probably the kind of compensation that you're talking about for a move like this.
Problem for them is, like, if they're going to do a transition, they also are going to have to go back into the quarterback purgatory, right? I mean, Geno's clearly not – he's fine.
Well, he's
not a guy.
Too.
In that, too. I mean, yeah, he's getting up there in age. Like, if you're going to trade away your best weapon, DK Metcalf, you're going to release Tyler Lockett, which I'm not even saying was the wrong call. I mean, he's clearly in the decline.
Yeah.
Might as well start looking at, hey, like, if we are transitioning, doesn't this kind of mean we're probably going to be back in this quarterback market here before too long?
Yeah, I think they're going to be in the quarterback market no matter what, though. I don't think this changed that. Geno Smith is sneaky old. I think he's like 36.
Oh, my gosh, he's that old already?
He was in like the 2013 draft, I want to say.
Yeah, if anything, this would expedite, I think, the shift, because if 34. You were planning on competing in the NFC West for one more season, okay, you can bide your time with Smith. But if that's really not the course of action here, then what's the sense in running it back with Smith for one more year?
Yeah, so I think that this is We'll see if they get this done, by the way. It's possible DK Metcalf requested a trade, and the Seahawks say, we're not doing that.
The classic, that's cute.
We'll see if they're able to get this thing done. All right, next thing that I wanted to get to is the news from earlier today. Kansas City Chiefs, my squad, decided to trade an all-pro left guard. Oh. Now, you may be wondering to yourself, and it would be understandable if you are, why are they trading a Pro Bowl left guard if they need help on the offensive line? It's a totally reasonable reaction to this trade, a more than fair reaction. Here's the thing. They believe in youth. They like going young, and Joe Thuney, their left guard that they traded earlier today for a future 4th-round draft selection to the Chicago Bears, is 33. He's going to get a contract extension most likely this offseason from the Bears. Probably sign him to like a 3-year deal. I think this is a really smart move for the Bears. They got better. They've got a young quarterback, which means they're paying him basically no money. They have now in the last 2 days traded for a left guard and a right guard. They're probably going to sign a center. Boom, you've got your offensive line set in place now. Caleb Williams can breathe a little bit going into next year. This is a smart way for the Bears to operate. It's also probably the smart move for the Chiefs. It sucks because you get worse at left guard. There's no way the Chiefs will get better. Joe Thuney might be the best left guard in the NFL, and that might be the case for one more year. And he had a $26 million cap hit this year for the Chiefs. So if they didn't make this move, they couldn't bring back Trey Smith, who they have placed the franchise tag on, but they want to re-sign long-term. All of this gets very convoluted, but the quickest way that I can explain why the Chiefs would do this, they save $16 million, which allows them to re-sign Trey Smith, and now they can go out there and hopefully sign a left tackle. So the math is basically, is it better for us to have a great left guard and a terrible left tackle, which is what they were going to have if they ended up bringing back Joe Thuney, or is it better for us to have average left guard and average to above average left tackle? For me, I view the offensive line as a weakest link position. If you're at least average everywhere, you're probably going to be fine. Very few teams have all pros at every position. If you've got a place that is a black hole on the offensive line, you're done. You're toast. And we saw what that looks like in the Super Bowl for the Chiefs.
Yeah, it's an interesting...
It's a smart move. It just sucks.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's an interesting move because, I mean, like you said, he's one of the best left guards in the game. I'll be curious to know, like, what their pivot is then to the open market to go sign that left tackle.
The only good one on the market is Ronnie Stanley.
Yeah, and
it's the only good one.
That's the thing is, like, okay, well, now you're going to fight for him, and there's going to be other teams that are really going to be pushing for his services. Now, it does help that you've won, couple Super Bowls and you got the best quarterback in the league in Patrick Mahomes. Makes it a little bit more appealing to come and play for you, but feels a little risky in my opinion of, hey, let's trade a guy that we know is really good, try and go to that free agent market. Because like you said, it's really him, and then it's a pretty significant drop-off once you move past him.
Yeah, BK, you know it better than any of us. The fact of the matter is that Kansas City has been masterful at basically pulling this trigger 1 year earlier rather than 1 year too late. Entering the final year of the deal. What you have a problem with, I think, if you're a Chiefs fan right now, at least initially, you're trying to reconcile all this and you're realizing, okay, this is the guy over the last 2 seasons who has had the highest pass block win rate in the entire league, and he literally has given you everything as far as versatility. He bumped out, obviously, to the tackle position. So I do think it's a good point, though, insofar as are you going to get 1 more year of elite play there, and then what happens thereafter? You've definitely prioritized going with Smith long-term there. It's just tough to realize, okay, you've got him at that $21 million figure. Thuney, to have to part with him, he's the consummate winner. He has done everything for you, you've asked.
He's been great. But eventually, you got to move on from these guys. The Patriots always used to do this. Their model was, we're moving on from a guy a year too early, not a year too late. We're going to get something in return for them, and we'll hopefully be able to patch together that position. Patriots did this with a dozen different guys on their teams, guys that were franchise icons. Richard Seymour, they did this with him. I think Logan Mankins, they moved on from a little bit earlier than people expected. This was their MO, and the Chiefs are trying to replicate the long-term success that the Patriots had. Is what you have to do in order to get that. Otherwise, you end up re-signing Joe Thuney this offseason to a 3-year deal, and then those last 2 years might be really bad. This might have been the last year where he's at an all-pro level. I'm not expecting that, but people typically don't expect the cliff before they get there. People thought Aaron Rodgers was going to be good for the foreseeable future when he signed with the Jets. Guess what? It happens quick, dude. One injury, and it's over. So it's frustrating, but it's the right way to go about it. With Tanner Hendrickson and Bradford Bruns, I'm Brandon Kiley. Chris Kerber, the voice of the Blues, going to join us coming up next here on 101 ESPN.
101 ESPN is powered by Kaufman Townsley St. Louis's injury lawyers. Call 314-500-5000.
All right, folks. Well, March is here, and you know what that means. That means that sometimes that heat's going to start to creep up. Sometimes the cold's going to still creep in. So you're hitting that button on your furnace, and sometimes you're going heat. Sometimes you're going air conditioning. Make sure that it's up and running well. Classic Air Care is going to help you do that. You log on to their website at classicaircare.com. You can set an appointment online. You can call their phone number. They have a live person that'll answer it. You can set an appointment that way. You make sure that they get out to your house and get you ready for the spring and get that unit maintained. Look, it's one of the most important pieces of equipment in your house. Number one, safety. You want to make sure there's no cracks, no issues anywhere along the line. The other two is it's the one thing that keeps your house comfortable. You set it for the temperature that you want. When you have one of those types of units in your house, you make sure you maintain it, and Classic Air Care does it for you easily. They've got maintenance plans available for you, so it's out of sight, out of mind, and they schedule it to make sure that they are there to take care of you. They take care of my house, they'll take care of yours. It's Classic Air Care. They've been making people comfortable since 1926.
Take the fast lane home weekdays from 2 to 6 p.m. with Anthony Stalter, Jamie Rivers, and Gary Davis on 101 ESPN. Two former pros and one average Joe. The fast lane is driven by Scrap Mart Metals Recycling. 101 ESPN Sports Center.
Parayko's Blues poised to take on L.A. Good afternoon. I'm Bradford Bruns. This Sports Center update is brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. Tonight at 9:30 p.m. right here on 101 ESPN. St. Louis back in action on the ice. For the first time since Sunday's loss in Dallas, it'll be Blues Kings pregame at 8:30 p.m. Earlier this hour on BK and Ferrario, Chris Pronger, the Hockey Hall of Famer, talked about the growth of Colton Parayko and what has made him so effective over the last stretch.
His awareness of when to jump in the offensive zone, and I think his willingness to shoot the puck. In years past, he was double clutching and he was passing up shot opportunities, and I think this year you're just seeing him let it rip.
That full interview available after the show on 101ESPN.com. The Sports Center update has been brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
This is exactly where you want to be listening to us. It's BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN.
With Tanner and Bradford on BK. Happy to go out to the Callier and Thompson hotline to be joined by Chris Kerber. He's the voice of the Blues. He's going to be on the call for the Blues at the Kings tonight. Pregame for that one starting at 8:30. Puck drop at 9:30. Alex a little under the weather. Hoping to get him back in with us tomorrow on the show. Kerbs, we appreciate the time as always, man. One final game prior to the Blues NHL trade deadline decisions. How you doing today, my man?
I'm doing good out here. The team's just about to take the ice here in Los Angeles, so they're energetic. They're pumped up. We'll see how it all goes.
All right, Curbs, let's get into it. Let's talk big picture about this team before we get into the micro of what you're expecting from tonight's game. Blues have been playing really inspired hockey since that Four Nations face-off break, even on Sunday when they ended up losing the game 6-3. At 5-on-5, they well outplayed the Dallas Stars for most of that one. What have you seen that's been the biggest change for the Blues since that break?
You know what? I think the break was important. It gave them some rest, gave everybody a chance to catch up. I go back to when the Blues, fired Drew Bannister, hired Jim Montgomery, and it just felt like it was a constant whirlwind right up through that Four Nations break for some of the longest travel scenarios I've been a part of. And I think it was good for them mentally to regroup. Then they came out, BK, and they had some really good practices, and it gave Jim Montgomery a chance to strategize that break. They'd really look in and dig into his team. And they've come back, really ready to go. They're getting very good goaltending for the most part. They're getting terrific output now from some of their top players. Robert Thomas has just been fantastic for the Blues, but they're also just getting some more contributions from the guys further down the lineup. Very good play from Zach Bolduc. I talked to Jim Montgomery yesterday about him. Matthew Joseph, the defensive play of Oscar Sundqvist in the defensive zone. Jim Montgomery thinks that Oscar Sundqvist is one of the best defensive forwards on this hockey team with the routes he takes. So those things are all paying off, and it's resulting in a much better offensive zone round for the Blues.
And Kerbs, what have you seen from Pavel Buchnevich since the break? You know, he spoke, I think it was over the weekend, if I remember correctly, about, hey, I can move again. I feel healthy again. And ever since the break, he has played like the Buchnevich that we expected, and it's really led to that top line finding so much success since the Four Nations break.
Yeah, you know, it's the one thing, guys, that I'm always very careful with, you know, when it comes to breaking plays down and how players are doing, because, you know, if he's coming out saying he felt healthy again, that means that he was dealing with something for quite a while, and that impacted his play without a doubt. So, you know, that's one thing that why you're always a little bit careful with these guys, try to play through every last little bump and bruise and injury that they have. But listen, Tanner, I think the biggest piece, honestly, is it's more consistent, better play from Robert Thomas that's helping Buchnevich, and clearly with Jake Neighbors. Robert's making better plays in the defensive zone. He's staying on the puck more, and he's winning it, and that's helping his transition game a lot. And Pavel Buchnevich is an extremely high IQ hockey player, very smart. He knows he's not a pure goal scorer. He knows he's a mix of both a passer and a goal scorer, and he looks for that. Well, the play of Robert Thomas has really been dictating that line. And the other massive thing, guys, is faceoffs. During that last, 6-game run, or the Blues are 6-2-2 in their last 12. They've been very dominant on the faceoff dot, and that's a big help.
Chris Kerber is the voice of the Blues. He's joining us here on BK and Ferrario. Kerb's another player that's really taken his game to another level since that break, but it started even before that, is third-line winger Zach Bolduc. He's now up to 10 goals on the season. He's a plus 14 on the ice this year. I know it's not the perfect stat, but, hey, when a young player like Zach Bolduc is leading you in plus-minus, it's not the worst thing in the world. What has led to his success, in your opinion?
Progress. Just simple progress and good coaching. Right before Christmas time, they put Claude Julien on him, meaning Claude was really working hard with him. And, man, I'm telling you, when you talk to any one of these coaches about the coachability of players, this is clearly one of them. So Claude would meet with them, and they'd go over video after every single game or before practice the next day. Then they got to the point, okay, it's getting a little bit heavy, so they started, let's go through 2 or 3 game stretches, and then we'll sit back down. And, one of the things that Zach was learning how to do is how do you take the defensive responsibility of the game? How do you get high on the puck? And working those habits in just takes time. This guy is still a rookie in the National Hockey League, and it's been clicking. Now, again, you got to look at line mates. They've had the same line now, then they're going to have the same lineup tonight, except Bennington's going to be in goal, right? So you're talking now, I believe it's 6 or 7 straight games with the exact same lineup and line combinations. That's helping Joseph. Oscar Sundqvist has been good in there, and that's helping Bolduc. But BK, he takes coaching, and he tries to work it in. And like any young player, it takes a little time to get some of that consistency in there. But I think he's got one of the best wrist shots, one of the best slap shots, one of the hardest shots on this team. He releases it just about quicker than anybody else we have on this team. And it's been a very good, solid year for him. He's taken some of the scratches to heart. He's doing the work. He's putting the time in. The teammates like him. And I don't know what the full upside for him is. I don't have that kind of crystal ball, but there is so much to like about his all-around game, and he is growing very well with this hockey team.
Kerbs, the other day, The Athletic, they put together, and they do this every year going into kind of this stretch of the season, and they put together a list of like what each contender has in terms of elite center, elite winger, elite defenseman, elite goalie, top line center, winger, defenseman, top 6 forward, top pair defenseman. When you kind of look at that as just kind of the checklist for the St. Louis Blues, don't you feel like they are at the point where they've checked off just about all theirs? They are missing a couple holes, but you feel better about where they are today.
Well, yeah, you know what the thing is, Tanner, they were trying to figure out what does consistency look like for this team all season long, and it just hasn't been there. It hasn't been there where all the forwards are pulling the rope at the same time, the defense, everything. And then a couple games when they did, that seems to be the game where the goaltending went a little wonky on you. So they've been very consistent here. They remain a team that's the sum of their parts. They don't have a McDavid, a Malkin, a Crosby. They don't really have the true superstar, right? They have an elite centerman in Robert Thomas that's a high end with the passing. His shooting is making a difference, but there continues to need and be growth and consistency from him, and I think you're starting to see that. But they don't necessarily have that game breaker, it seems. So they've got to be all pulling in the same direction, and they are. They're very, very solid in what they do. But what we've seen is sometimes in that depth area, I think that's why if you look at the 2 losses in these last 8 games that they've had. You look at the Winnipeg loss and the Dallas Stars loss. They outplayed the Dallas Stars 5-on-5. They got out. Their goaltending was good, and then the penalty killing really hurt the Blues. The Winnipeg Jets, they were 30 seconds away from 2 points in that game. You look at those two things, and sometimes the difference in winning those extra 5-6 games a year, right, is the difference in having that extra good player that can be a game breaker, that kind of thing. And so it shows you where the Blues are, which is right in the thick of things, still with a terrific chance of making the playoffs. But are they at the elite level? Not just yet. They have to be the sum of their parts where everybody is playing their role and playing well.
As of today, the Calgary Flames have that final spot in the postseason. They have 67 points in 61 games. The Blues 3 points back of the Flames, 64 points in 62 games. Curbs, we appreciate the time, man. We'll be looking forward to hearing you on the call tonight. Blues at the LA Kings pregame for this late one at 8:30 right here on 101 ESPN. Curbs will bring the puck drop your way at 9:30 right here on your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN. Appreciate the time as always, man. Enjoy yourself out there in sunny California.
All right, guys. Have an awesome week. Talk to you next time.
That's Chris Kerber, voice of the Blues, joining us as he does each and every Wednesday here on BK and Ferrario. I think he's right. Like right now, what you're looking at with this team is a playoff hopeful, and they're doing it with this pack mentality again. And it's possible that this is just the way that they go about building, and maybe it ends up working for them again. I think it's much easier to go about it when you have a true superstar and everybody wants that superstar. They're just so hard to find, man.
Yeah.
Like it's really hard to find the guy that you can put him into your lineup and immediately assume, okay, that's 40 goals and 90-plus points every single season. There's like 10 of those dudes in the NHL, maybe. So the other 20 teams that don't have one of those guys, and there are a couple of them that are on the same team right now, you've got to figure out your way to build. And for the Blues, that is meant going with this pack mentality, and it means, hey, if we get a couple of guys that are point-per-game producers, which they have, that's good enough. It's not great, but it's good enough for them, and that's the way that they're trying to construct their roster right now. With T-Bone and Bradford, I'm BK. Coming up next, we're going to dive into the junk drawer here in BK and Ferrario.
101 ESPN's Blues Fan of the Week.
Congratulations to Keenan Fagan from Troy, Illinois. He was just named our 101 ESPN Blues Fan of the Week.
Submit your pick now to be the next 101 ESPN Blues Fan of the Week and take home a pair of tickets to an upcoming Blues game. Learn more at 101ESPN.com. It's BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. Let's open it up. The Junk Drawer with BK and Ferrario.
Let's dive into the junk drawer here in just a moment. A little bit of an update from the Cardinals. Ivan Herrera came into today hitless in the spring. Is he going to be okay? He has 2 doubles so far. He has had 2 at-bats, 2 doubles down the line for Ivan Herrera. I think he's going to be just fine. We don't have to have the full panic mode on the Cardinals offense just yet.
Don't you act like his spring doesn't matter.
Okay.
You know? Paz is clearly the front runner for that starting catching job.
Other bit of news passed along. The Raiders are making star edge rusher Max Crosby the highest paid non-quarterback in the entire NFL. According to Ian Rappaport, he gets a 3-year deal worth $106 million. $91 million of that is guaranteed the moment that he signs the deal. So $35 million per year on a 3-year contract for Max Crosby. He's worth every penny of that. That dude is a stud. He is an absolute terror to go up against. When your favorite team is playing against the Raiders, you want to identify where that guy is before the snap on every single play. It's infuriating watching him play. When he's going up against you, when he's on your team, if you're a Raiders fan, I would imagine you love watching him play. I hope as a Chiefs fan, I don't want this, but as an NFL neutral observer, I hope the Raiders are better soon. Because they have some really fun players, man. Max Crosby is a really good player. And Brock Bowers on the offensive side of the ball is an absolute superstar already. Year 1, that guy's probably, as of today, the best tight end in the league. I know that sounds crazy, but I think he's already there. So you've got a couple of real building blocks on that team. They've got to find a quarterback and another weapon of some regard, like whether that's Ashton Genty in the draft or finding a legit go-to wide receiver to go along with Brock Bowers. The Raiders could get interesting a lot quicker than I think people are giving them credit for. Reminds me a little bit of the Broncos last year. You suddenly get a good coach in there, you get a better quarterback in place, 9-10 wins on the table for them, similar to what it was with the Broncos last year. I think the same kind of improvement could be there for the Raiders.
For them to be relevant, at least, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. What a week for that guaranteed money to be flowing. Woo!
Yeah. I mean, that's all you want as a neutral NFL observer is, dude, Max Crosby is such a wrecking ball. He's the only reason that every time the Raiders go against the Chiefs, those games are close. And it's because he's just getting in Patrick Mahomes' face the entire game. So if they can add a couple of pieces and just be, like I said, relatively competitive, 500. They don't even be a playoff team. They'll be super fun to watch.
All right, so for the junk drawer today, I've got a story to read for you guys. This is a little bit of an update on a story that had taken place previously. Citigroup, one of the biggest banks in America, accidentally transferred $81 trillion into an account last April instead of the $280 that had previously been requested. Now, there were 2 different staffers that were on this account that had approved the spending spree effectively by this bank. 90 minutes later, a 3rd employee saw this and was like, stop, please stop this. Somebody, please stop this. They got it taken care of. They have said now that, hey, this never could have gone through. We don't have $81 trillion to spend to wire to somebody's account. It just serves as another reminder. Dude, weird stuff happens. Like, can you imagine how difficult it is to approve $81 trillion to go into imagine the number of zeros that you would see floating across your screen. So many of us just go into autopilot when we're doing stuff, whether it's work related or just in our own personal lives. I'm sure that's what this was. 2 guys are sitting in front of their computer all day long, just approving transactions, approving transactions, approving transactions. This one comes across the screen, no reason not to approve the transaction. And then the 3rd person sees it and he's like, yo, hey.
That's a lot of zeros.
This is not okay. We cannot allow this to take place. I did this when I was trying to buy those stupid fraudulent Mizzou tickets.
That's what I thought of, honestly.
I tried to get into my Apple Pay, and instead I got into my Apple Cash. I didn't know there were 2 different options there. So now whenever I've got like a subscription that I've got, it says, hey, your Apple Cash is going down. I'm like, I thought I got rid of that. So yeah.
Okay.
Money is hard to figure out with technology. Is
sure,
what I'm saying.
But like, wouldn't you notice a whole bunch of extra zeros, even if it is the monotony of just approving and approving and approving?
Did Shohei? I don't know. eBay can only dream of this much to throw around.
That's fair. But Ohtani, Ohtani's not looking at his bank account ever, probably.
Clearly.
Well,
Considering there were
probably. He's
millions that
never
were
looking
missing.
at it. But, this guy has to approve of that and still doesn't notice that there's, how many zeros is that? That's what, 9, 10?
Enough, yeah.
12? Yeah, how do you not notice that? And, even if you put, I don't know what you call it, the decimal spot there, that many zeros wouldn't carry over past that. It's one thing if you accidentally, I've accidentally pulled out $1,000 from my bank account instead of $100 when I meant to do it. And boy, let me tell you, when that ATM started throwing out that many dollar bills, I was like, whoa, what just happened? Did I break the machine?
Heart jumped in your throat, right?
Yeah. Then I checked the receipt and I saw what happened. So I had to go into the bank and say, hey, I need to put this back in this account. That I can get. This is a lot of zeros to misplace. This is a little ridiculous.
Yeah, 1 too many, or 12 too many.
Yeah.
With Tanner Hendrickson and Bradford Bruns, I'm Brandon Kiley. Coming up in about 15 minutes here on BK and Ferrario, Mizzou has a huge test tonight, the likes of which multiple teams failed in last night. We'll talk about that here in just a little bit. But next, we continue our countdown of the 20 most important Cardinals for the 2025 season with number 18 on our list, another player that may or may not even make the opening day roster. We'll talk about that next year on 101 ESPN.
101 ESPN has your chance to win a pair of tickets to see your St. Louis Blues take on the Vancouver Canucks on March 20th at Enterprise Center. The first 12,000 fans to enter the arena that night will receive a mystery Blues hat, courtesy of Ticketmaster, with 3 different designs available. Get more details and get entered to win that free pair of tickets for Blues vs. Canucks on March 20th and the mystery hat giveaway right now at 101ESPN.com or on your 101 mobile app.
Come and see why T.R. Hughes is St. Charles and now Warren County's premier home builder. TRHughes.com.
St. Louis homeowners, it seems as if everyone who wanted to sell their home last year is finally starting to take action. If you're ready to sell your home, I strongly recommend you call my friend and St. Louis real estate expert, Gloria Liu, with your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty. Here's why Gloria should be your first call. Well, let's ask the O'Neill family. Gloria sold their home for $30,000 over list price, or the Krupp family. Gloria sold their home over one weekend for $25,000 over asking price. Or maybe ask the Cox family, who received multiple offers and sold for $20,000 over list price, which, by the way, was the highest sales price the subdivision had ever seen. You get
St. Louis Blues hockey can be heard exclusively on 101 ESPN. Get the info you need before and after every Blues game with a First Community pre- and post-game show.
First Community Credit Union, calling St. Louis home for 90 years and powered by Scott Lee Heating Company.
WXOS HD1 East St. Louis. 101 ESPN is driven by Auto Centers Nissan, home of the lifetime warranty and 30-day return. Giving you the picture, the real big St. Louis sports picture. It's BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. The 20 most important Cardinals for the 2025 season. Number 18.
And a little flare. That's going to be the first big league knock. Thomas Saggese gets a souvenir and a big ovation.
Thomas Saggese.
Thomas Saggese is a very interesting player, T-Bone. Last year, he didn't have great stats down in the minor leagues. However, he's a player that 2 years ago was really damn good down in the minors. And when he came over to the Cardinals, he was one of the best hitters in the Texas League, and then gets here and continues to have some of that success down in the minors. And then last year, went down to the Arizona Fall League and was awesome there. So the question going into the offseason was, where does he fit? What is his fit with the Cardinals in 2025? Well, with Nolan Arenado on the roster, the answer appears to be nowhere. I think he's going to be in Memphis to start out the season because there's just not going to be at-bats for Thomas Saggese. This is a top 100 prospect in all of Major League Baseball, or he's that caliber of player at a minimum. And he can play basically anywhere on your infield. He can play second, he can play third, he can, in a pinch, play shortstop for you. Did a lot of that down in Memphis last year. T-Bone, to me, the reason why I think he's a legit 20 most important player on the Cardinals is not so much because of like the impact that he's going to have necessarily, so much as his value might be for other teams to see what he can be. I had him at 18 on my list. T-Bone had him at 20. Alex had him all the way at number 15. I wish he was here so we could hear his explanation on why he was so high on his countdown of the 20 most important players. But for you, what do you view as the value of Thomas Saggese going into this season?
Yeah, I think the value for him is more of the auditioning for other teams, if I'm being honest, kind of like how you had said it. Because when I look at his role, and it's why he ended up being 20 on my list, because I had a tough time figuring out if he belonged in the top 20 or if he wasn't on it at all. And it's because I don't see him being here much this season. I mean, things are already trending towards, hey, Mo wants their top prospects to play in AAA if they're not going to play every day. Okay, well, that would mean Saggese then will start the season at AAA, and then it's going to take somebody getting hurt for him to come up. And when you're going by that, it's just hard for me to figure out exactly what his role is. So for me, it is about, hey, showcasing himself for other teams. And part of that is because I just don't know what his turn. Not only is it this year, what I'm talking about, like what's his role, it's beyond this year. Like, what is Saggese's role long term? Because when you're talking super utility, as you had mentioned, is kind of what he can do right now. Okay, well, Donovan's that, and I don't think he's going anywhere. He's not a guy you're getting answers on this year. You already know he's a good baseball player. Okay, well, maybe if Glorber doesn't hit, then he's the second baseman. Well, no, because you've got Weatherholt that's coming here potentially next year, along with the idea of, hey, Donovan can just slot into that spot. And then I look at it and go, okay, is it third base? Well, Arenado's there right now. And then maybe if it is long-term, it's probably more of a Gorman spot if he does end up hitting. Like, I just don't know where he fits with the organization long-term. And that's why, for me, it is all about, okay, play well in AAA. At some point, we are going to see him this season. I don't doubt that at all. But when you get up here, play well, and then it's probably, okay, that becomes your number one trade asset, whether it be probably next offseason or if at the trade deadline they are like a marginal buyer.
The one thing that helps him is his handedness. He's a right-handed bat, whereas all of the names that you just mentioned that could play second or third, or even potentially in left field if you want to bring in Lars Nootbaar into this mix as well, they're all lefties. And you like Alec Burleson, same thing, DH, lefty. This team for years has had a lack of left-handed hitters. And now, all of a sudden, because they value that position or that handedness so much, they almost have a surplus of the lefties. It's happening in the bullpen as well, where you look at the opening day roster and you think to yourself, man, I used to have to kind of squint and tilt my head to the side to see where is the lefty coming from that can help you beyond just one guy. And now it's like, oh, they've got 3 or 4 of them that I think are locked in to being in your bullpen or starting rotation potentially on opening day. I think that's what helps him. That's how he ends up part of this roster. But I think for opening day, Lucan Baker's the guy that probably holds on to the role that eventually Thomas Saggese could have for this team in 2025. And that's for like right now. Beyond this year, though, I just don't really see it. Donovan is a guy that he had some struggles in this regard last year against lefties, but overall has mostly been fine against left-handed pitchers. And you would assume J.J. Weatherholt is going to be a player that doesn't have huge splits against righties or lefties. So it gets really crowded again in that infield. I just don't know how Thomas Saggese fits in unless he swings his way into the everyday lineup, and there's just no denying he is the obvious answer to their questions, either at second or third for the near future. I just think there's a pretty decent chance that Thomas Saggese will have more value to the Cardinals in a trade than he does for them on the roster. The other scenario is he takes on the role that Donovan has previously had, where he's just playing all over the place. It's possible. It's kind of hard to see that fit for the team, given where they're at right now and where they're likely to be this time next year. I like Saggese. We've talked with him personally. Seems like a good dude. I like the style of hitter that he is, where he does make contact all the time. He's like right-handed version of Alec Burleson in that regard. I just don't see the spot for him on this roster. And so it brought us to the question of who are the Cardinals most likely to be traded before the start of next year? Like guys that are on the roster today that you think will not be here next year. And I'm not taking into account Ryan Helsley, he's on an expiring deal, or Miles Michaelis, again, expiring deal, Steven Matz, expiring deal. Who are the guys that are under contract for next season, that are on the roster right now, that you think will be traded before we get to this time next year? T-Bone, I think Saggese's one of those players for me. Who else fits into that list, in your opinion?
Well, I think if Gorman doesn't end up hitting his stride this season, I think he falls on that list. I mean, we've talked about it earlier today, right? Like, Weatherholt's coming, and Gorman's the guy that's probably under the most pressure this season to, hey, you either end up hitting this level at the level that we thought when we drafted you and developed you, or you end up just becoming a piece that we trade somewhere else and see if somebody else will value a power-hitting left-hander, because we've got our guy that can replace him internally. He would be the number one guy that I would circle right now and say, hey, he's probably there. Other guys that, like, I would put them on, like, the watch list, and, like, I'm going to say this name, so don't yell at me, because I don't want to do it. I could see where Herrera falls onto this watch list, right? If he ends up being a guy that they don't trust to be a catcher, they're kind of logjam at first base if they were to look at a position change. Same with the DH, right? They got a lot of DH profile bats. I could see where they just look at him and say, let's use him as a trade chip. I wouldn't personally do that because I would find him a position to play because I think he can hit at the big leagues. And as we've seen, that is like very hard to find. It is very hard to hit major league pitching. But I do think that he's probably a guy that will fall onto this conversation. And I think Burley could be in the same conversation as Herrera. I think those two, I wouldn't put them in the, hey, they could be trade bait come this time next season. I think they're on the watch list, though. They are the two that I'm monitoring with kind of blinking lights as, okay, I see how they can fit here, but I don't know how the Cardinals really value those two guys.
We mentioned Saggese. You mentioned Gorman, Herrera, and Burleson. I have three other names that I would throw out here, and two of them I think fit into the same category, and it could be deadline types of moves. Contreras and Sonny. I just don't know. I don't know what the plan is there. I'm at least open to the idea that one of them or both of them change their minds and say, you know what, I think I would like to go to a contender. I think Sonny Gray of the two is probably more likely to come to that conclusion because he's closer to the end of his career, whereas Wilson, I think Wilson might view this as an opportunity for himself to have like a second act of his major league career of going from I am a catcher to I am a hitter. And you will find a spot for me to be in your lineup every day. And whether that's here in St. Louis or elsewhere beyond that, guys can hold on to that. Look at J.D. Martinez for the next 5 years in Wilson Contreras' career. So he to me is almost in a separate category, but I'll put them together kind of in one. And then the one other name that I don't think that you mentioned that I would throw into this, depending on what happens this year, is Lars Nootbaar. It's possible the Cardinals come to a conclusion at the end of this season and say, Brendan Donovan's our everyday left fielder. And J.J. Weatherholt is our everyday second baseman, and Nolan Gorman is our everyday third baseman. That's the way we want our roster to be constructed. Lars Nootbaar, we like him. We think he has value. But I think other teams will also see Lars Nootbaar as extremely valuable on the trade market. And that's a scenario where you could see something like Lars Nootbaar, Thomas Saggese, and one of their current young starters that are in the minor leagues. Maybe it's a Gordon Graceffo, for example. Trade those three in a package and you get a stud starter, or you get a stud center fielder, something, whatever it is that you decide at the end of the season that you're missing, you could go out and get that with those players that I just mentioned. So that could become the type of package that becomes very valuable for them at the end of the year as well.
Yeah, and I could see that with Newbar because, and I feel like we talk about this a lot with the Cardinals, is sometimes they learn the wrong lessons and they end up getting scared into things. Like we talked yesterday about, like, hey, the whole reason they kind of pivoted away from trading away from like this, what we're talking about, which is, hey, you got this surplus. At some point you should deal from it. They got scared away from it from the Randy Arozarena and Ozuna trades. I think for me, I think one of the lessons they can learn in the right direction is when you look back at the O'Neal situation, where it was, hey, this guy can never stay healthy. You saw it happen once where he put it together. Why not sell high on him? They didn't. They ended up holding him until they ended up getting two guys I don't even think are in the organization anymore, and they got him for nothing. You can almost have the same conversation with Newbar. If Newbar ends up having another, whether it be somewhat healthy season, like say he plays 130 games, which would be somewhat of an improvement for him and still is a pretty good piece, there will still be teams that will value Lars Newbar. He's still under cost control, still a guy that can come in and get a high on-base percentage. A lot of teams will probably still view him as a potential Brandon Nimmo type guy. And if you're the Cardinals, you say, hey, we've been through this. Why not part ways with him and go get something that we really need?
Somebody on the text line, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. This comes from the 314. Says, guys, if you looked at things another way, what is the best lineup for the Cardinals moving forward if you assume that all of the prospects end up doing well? Let's say they reach like 70th percentile outcome. So they're really good based on what our current expectations are, but don't reach like the ultimate ceiling, right? So like Jordan Walker doesn't become Aaron Judge, but he's a good player, like a 270 hitter, hits 25 to 30 home runs, and you feel good about him being an everyday right fielder for you for the foreseeable future. Let's go through this real quick, T-Bone. I think behind the plate, that means Herrera is your starter.
Agreed.
First base, I think that probably means it's
Contreras
/ Burleson, but I think Contreras is probably your starter, and then DH is probably Burleson in this scenario. I think Burleson's probably Burleson's probably a trade.
Yeah, Burley's probably the one that's odd man out still.
Okay, so Contreras is your first baseman. Second base is probably Weatherholt.
Yeah. Shortstop
is Wynn.
Third base, are we trading Arenado, I'm assuming?
I think it's Gorman.
Yeah, okay, so Gorman, I agree.
I think left field is Newt.
Center, Scott.
Yep.
And then right, Walker.
Yep.
In theory, that sounds like a great lineup.
Yeah, I think that's, and then DH in this scenario is Donnie, but I'm just using that really as a placeholder more than anything else because he'll start somewhere every single day. Yeah, I think that's probably what you're looking at. Herrera, Contreras, Weatherholt, Wynn, Gorman, Newbar, Scott, Walker, and Donnie. The fact that we can put that together speaks to what I had mentioned the other day. A lot of people are really high on the Blues and low on the Cardinals when I think they're in very similar spots. The difference is the Blues have had this season to get their answers on some of those young guys, and most of them have come back with positive returns. By the end of this Cardinals season, it's going to go in one way or the other. I don't know which direction we're going to head by the end of the season. It could be that by the end of the season, we're all in conclusion saying, this is not good. They don't have the young talent to be able to get out of this with the transition. It is a rebuild. It's also possible they feel similar to what the Blues are at right now, where you can look through and you're like, okay, there's our top 9. Feel pretty good about it. They're missing 2 guys right now, but you feel pretty good about it. They're missing those 2 guys the way that the Cardinals are basically missing
second and center.
Yeah, Weatherholt and Victor Scott, or you could say like Weatherholt and number 2 starter that could be Quinn Matthews for them, right? So I think they're in pretty similar spots right now. You just really need to get positive returns from some of these young guys. That's the important part now for 2025. With Tanner Hendrickson and Bradford Bruns, I'm Brandon Kiley. If you missed it, our number 18 most important Cardinal for the 2025 season is Thomas Saggese. More so because of his value to them long-term via trade than it is what he's going to do for them on the field for the upcoming season. Coming up next, Mizzou has a huge test tonight, the likes of which multiple teams have already failed over the last few days. We'll talk about that next year on 101 ESPN.
Start your day with the morning after on 101 ESPN. Get in the know first on everything St. Louis sports with Tim McKernan, Doug Vaughn, and Martin Kilcoy. Listen to TMA weekday mornings from 7 to 11 a.m. on 101 ESPN. The morning after is presented by Brown and Crouppen Law Firm.
If we can raise a highway slab. Hey, it's BK for my friends over at Circus Sports in the state of Illinois. I love placing bets on my Missouri Tigers this time of the year. They are a 5-point favorite against Oklahoma tonight on the road. We'll be talking a little bit more about this game here in just a moment. This is a scary one. On the road in the SEC, desperate team, somebody that really needs to win this one in order to feel good about their seeding in the NCAA tournament. I still like the Tigers, though. I think they take care of business on the road tonight. 5-point favorite over on Circus Sports in Illinois. I also like the over in this game. It's set at 161.5 points. The reason why? Oklahoma more than happy to go out there and run with Mizzou. These teams have faced against one another before. That game ended really poorly for Oklahoma. They didn't shoot it well. Missouri shot the lights out of the ball. Boom, game over for that one. I think this one's a little bit closer. $100 bet over on the Circa Sports app in the state of Illinois wins you $265. The nice thing about betting with Circa for this game, you get better odds. Missouri only a 5-point favorite on Circa, 5.5 over on FanDuel. The over-under is a point lower on Circa as well. So get those odds in your favor right now with Circa Sports in Illinois. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER or text ILGAMB to 833-234.
We're right back to more of it. It's BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN.
With T-Bone and Bradford on BK, so let's talk a little bit about the Tigers going into tonight. A huge test on the road going up against Oklahoma. Now, OU is not a great team, but it reminds me a lot of the last 2 weekends that Missouri has had a test on the road against Arkansas and then on the road against Vanderbilt. Those teams are like fringe NCAA tournament teams. That's what Oklahoma is. Oklahoma is probably going to make it to the tournament in part because of the strength of the SEC, but they're also 4-12 in the SEC so far this year. This is not a great team, but they're good offensively, and on their best nights, they can play with just about anybody. They have already beaten Mississippi State in the SEC this year. They've played some close games, including against Ole Miss. They just lost by 1 at home last week against Kentucky. Like, this is a team that if you allow them to stick with you, they can beat you. And we've seen this just last night, for example. Texas A&M was able to take down by like 10 points, I think it was, Auburn. And I think Auburn's the best team in the country right now. Texas A&M made them look silly for most of the night. Iowa State last night at home found a way to lose against BYU in overtime. That's a huge game for Iowa State that could potentially have huge implications, not just for them, but potentially for Mizzou, because Iowa State was a team that's potentially battling with Mizzou right now for seeding in the NCAA tournament. So, T-Bone, going into this one, if you're a fan that wants to see Mizzou on the 4 line, and I think that is the best case scenario for them right now. It's a protected seed. It gets you into a better location, keeps you potentially closer to home in a Midwest bracket, for example. This is the kind of game you got to win. They probably need to go 2-0 in the final 2 games of the season. Oklahoma on the road, Kentucky at home, and then probably win 1 game in the SEC tournament. If you're able to do those 3 things, just win basically your next 3 games, I think Mizzou ends up as a 4 seed. Do you think they can get it done tonight against Oklahoma on the road?
I think they can. The Oklahoma team, like, I've only seen them a couple of times, but every time I catch them on a bad night. And I walk away not feeling like they're a team that is a threat to beat the Missouri Tigers, for that matter, even a team that should be in the NCAA tournament. But I think you're right. I think if you want Mizzou to be the 4 seed, they probably have got to win the next 2 and then win at least 1 game in the SEC tournament. And if you lose one, probably got to make that up with a win or 2 in the conference tournament as well, which is going to be really hard because of how good this conference is. That's going to be a gauntlet for the SEC conference tournament. I will say this, too, for this game tonight. I think they're going to win. I am actually not as worried. I was actually shocked when BK said in the offseason, man, this Oklahoma team. And I went, really, man? I'm like feeling happy about the Tigers going into tonight's game. I feel like they should kill them.
Kill them? That seems aggressive.
Oh, sorry. I got a little excited there. But you keep bringing up like I'd say over the last week, you've been saying to me in the office or even here on the show, like, hey, there are some warning signs for this Tigers team of some things that are going wrong. And I've been on the opposite end of this saying, hey, I'm not too worried. You lose to Oklahoma tonight, and you'll finally have me on your side of, okay, there are some things that are starting to trend in the wrong direction for the Tigers. And if that's the case, losing tonight, and especially if it's what you've been talking about, getting beat up on the inside, losing the rebounding battle, then I'll really look at them and go, okay, there are some warning signs that are starting to flash as you get it like at the worst possible time as you get ready to enter the conference tournament right before the March Madness tournament begins.
Yeah, I think you have to be really careful about looking forward to Kentucky on Saturday morning. It's a surging Wildcat squad. It's closing out your regular season on Senior Day because, as Dennis Gates suggested just yesterday, as a matter of fact, this is an Oklahoma team. It wasn't just lip service. That is markedly better at home. Okay, the results are right there. They are right there for you in terms of evidence. And BK, really to echo some of the sentiments that you have had, it specifically comes down to the interior. And I'm looking at a lot of things went wrong in the waning minutes, the waning seconds of that game at Vanderbilt. We understand. You can lament some of the decision making. You can lament some of the calls with respect to the coaching. But this team has consistently been devoured on the glass. And when I look at the offensive rebounds, this is a time, this is an environment in which you must see the likes of a Josh Gray step up. I'm just going to say, you know, basically from night to night what you're going to get out from your wing play, what you're going to be able to get from a scoring standpoint. Mark Mitchell has been that guy. He has been asserting himself ever since that last game versus Oklahoma. But if you continue to allow these second and third chance opportunities, regardless of the opponent, that is the number one warning sign for me heading into the tournament.
Yeah, Oklahoma is basically one guy you have to worry about on the glass. They're not a good offensive rebounding team in general. This is not the kind of opponent that I'm typically worried about. That's why I said in my circuit read, I like Mizzou tonight. I think they will win this game. But Oklahoma has wins this year over Arizona, Louisville, Michigan, Mississippi State, Vandy. They have close losses by 2 on the road at A&M, by 3 on the road at Ole Miss, and by 1 at home against Kentucky. This is a team that can beat you. They've already got some really good wins, and that's why they're in the NCAA tournament as of now, T-Bone. You said you're not sure that they should be. When you beat Arizona, Louisville, Michigan, Mississippi State, and Vandy, you make the NCAA tournament. That's just the way that this thing works, for better or for worse, especially when you're potentially going to win 18 to 20 games over the course of the season. The thing that worries me is if you go into this game against a team that doesn't typically rebound well offensively, and then they do it against you, those potential warning signs become alarm bells. And now it is not just a, when you go up against Texas A&M or these teams that have real size in the interior that can give you trouble, that's a mismatch nightmare for Mizzou. It's also, every team is looking like Texas A&M against you, and you have no answer for it. So that's what I want to see tonight. What is Mizzou's answer for these teams that are seemingly finding new ways to exploit their switching defense, because they switch everything, and to take advantage of Josh Gray, both on the rebounding side of things and also just getting him into foul trouble, which forces Mizzou to go small and, once again, creates mismatches in the interior. So I want to see what Mizzou's able to do that. How do they stop the bleeding in that regard? I think they will. I'm just curious to see what the answers are for them going into this game tonight. One other thing that I wanted to get to college basketball-wise, kind of expanding this big picture. We mentioned some of the losses that took place last night in college basketball. Texas A&M with a big win at home against Auburn, and then BYU winning on the road at Iowa State. T-Bone, maybe I'm just losing. I'm a victim of, like, prisoner of the moment. Does it feel like there's more teams this year that have a wide range of outcomes than it does in typical seasons? Because I feel great about Auburn going into the tournament. I feel great about Duke going into the tournament. I think that's where the list ends. I think it's just 2 teams that I feel genuinely great about. And with Auburn, their best player is a wing/big man. And that always makes me a little nervous going into situations like this. Now, he has mobility. He's not like when Purdue went into the tournament with their big guy, with Edey.
Or us with Coburn.
That always made me nervous as hell because I could just double him in the interior and then take him away and now have your other 4 guys try to beat me. Good luck, especially when you play as slow as they do. But those 2 teams I feel great about, and it's basically nobody else. Like I'll use one team as an example, Iowa State. They're 11th right now in Ken Palm's rankings, 11th. I also have no idea which version of Iowa State we're going to be getting. They can beat anybody. They can also lose to BYU last night at home. They can lose to Oklahoma State last week on the road. And this is most of the tournament now. I don't know how to have any sort of like really strong opinions outside of 2 teams in the tournament. I feel like normally I'm more convinced on a greater number of teams, but maybe I'm missing something.
Yeah, I kind of feel that way as well because, like, I feel like every year there's, like, I don't know, 8 teams that I look at and go, okay, I think I know where they're going to go, right? And it typically ends up filling out my Elite 8 bracket.
Right.
And now, granted, I'm not telling you that works every time, but I do feel that way most years. But, like, this year, for example, like, I've been huge on this Alabama team. I love the way that they play. I love that they've got Sears, who's a veteran that's been in the tournament. And, like, we've seen in most recent, I think we talked last week, it's important to have veteran guys that can help you get through
Especially
March.
veteran guards.
Yeah, and Sears, it was been awesome. But then, like, when I watch Alabama play, there are nights where they look unbeatable. And then there's nights they can't buy a stop. And
that's the problem. They don't play defense.
And you saw that in the Missouri game. When they played Illinois, that was a problem for them. So, like, would it shock me if they made the tournament and got upset? Maybe not the first round, but definitely I could see where there's maybe a surprise in round 2. Or I think they could win the entire title. That's how good I think Alabama is offensively.
This week will go a long way in making you feel one way or the other.
Yeah.
Have you seen what their schedule is?
It's brutal.
They play Florida tonight. That's a home game. And then they go on the road on Saturday at Auburn. Their final 3 games of the regular season were Tennessee, Florida, and Auburn. You can make a case. Those are 3 of the 5 best teams in the country, and they see them back to back to back. They lost that first game against Tennessee. Now, it was a really close game, but they lost it because they didn't play defense. Now they go up against Florida and Auburn. We'll find out. We'll find out what the ceiling looks like for this team going into this week. Now, they could lose all 3 games and still win the national championship because that's what happens in March. But you're going to feel pretty strongly one way or the other depending on what happens with them this week.
Yeah, Nate Oates actually said as much at Mizzou a few weeks ago. That last 6 to 7 game stretch, he wasn't blowing it out of proportion, the toughest in the nation. And that's the thing, Tanner, with an Alabama. All it takes really is one relatively off shooting night, or a team such as Mizzou on that one special evening actually defeating the Crimson Tide at its own game to really spell the end. But you look at the top half of the bracket or the prohibitive best teams in the country, and I don't think last night's result, honestly, regarding Auburn made that much of a difference for me. Okay, you lost to a very, very good Texas A&M team, but go down the list. It's really right now you have to go to 7 or 10 before you find an Alabama, but there are so many teams lumped in there. Do you believe in a Houston this year? Do you actually think that Flag and Duke can make a deeper run? Do you buy stock in a St. John's team? Michigan Stadium, for that matter, too. I'm not saying it's a classic Izzo squad, but you can lump so many of these teams, maybe not into that first tier, but right behind the biggest guns.
Yeah. And then I don't know how you feel. I think we're probably on the same page about this, but teams that play extremely slow also worry me to an extent when you get to March.
I hate it.
So then, like, I look at teams like Tennessee, for example.
I think it's miserable to watch. I also think it allows teams that are not as good as you to stay in the game.
Slog it out.
Yeah. Now, I don't think there's anybody that's, like, classic old school Virginia in that regard.
Thank
but,
gosh.
like, Tennessee, like, they're the best defensive team in the country based on defensive rating on Ken Palm. And they're 26th in offense. They're 344th in adjusted tempo. There's like 20 teams worse than them in tempo. That's a team that we talk about. Houston's the same way. And those are 2 teams that I look at and I go, okay, I could see where they're in like the Final Four or they get to the national championship. I can also see, to your point, where they keep a bad team in it because they are playing so slow. And then to your point, anybody can lose in March on one bad shooting night. And it's not the NBA where you can get, okay, we can have one bad game because it's a best of 7. No, it's one night to potentially see if your season's going to end. And these teams that play slow that are near the top of the country, Houston, Tennessee, they worry me. It's why I kind of like that Missouri plays up-tempo basketball.
Last thing on this, we'll get out of here and talk a little bit about the Cardinals on the other side. Mizzou, if you're a fan of the Tigers and you want to see them with a top 4 seed in the SEC tournament, which is necessary to get the double bye, what you need to happen, basically, the easiest path to this. Mizzou wins their next 2 games. That's a starting point. Second part of this, Alabama has to lose their next 2 games. You need Alabama to lose. And these It's not crazy that Alabama could lose them. They're going up against two of the 5 best teams in the country, arguably. You need those two things to happen, and then Mizzou, because they beat Alabama head-to-head, would have that tiebreaker. It would be Auburn, Florida, Tennessee as your top 3. Mizzou would be the 4 seed in that scenario, and then Alabama would be the 5. So that's the way that things could fall together the rest of the way. Mizzou really could have helped itself if they had won that game on Saturday against Vandy, because then you're sitting 11-5 right now. You're tied with Tennessee, and you've got a bunch of outs because you're basically right there with Florida, Alabama, and Tennessee. You'd need to lose one. But because they lost that game, they made things really tough on them, and you now need Alabama to lose each of their next 2 games.
What a conference tourney, though, for real. I'm just about as excited about the league tournament as March Madness itself, for
it's
real.
Definitely probably going to be better than March Madness.
Yeah. The quality of basketball that you'll see starting in that 3rd round, that once you get the double bye teams in it, it's going to be as good as anything that you see up until probably the Elite 8 or so of the NCAA tournament. All right, coming up next, the Cardinals are apparently convinced Steven Matz is going to be one of their starters this year. We'll tell you the latest on that next year on 101 ESPN.
Jamie Rivers back with you here, and it's time for another jersey giveaway. This one is awesome. Justin Falk home jersey. Beautiful to add to your collection. You're absolutely going to love it. And all you have to do to get entered to win this autographed jersey is go to 101ESPN.com or visit 101, the mobile app powered by Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers.
Right now at Verizon, you can get one line for less.
play on ESPN.
Shoots, he scores!
Tonight, Blues and Kings. Pre-game at 8:30. Puck drop at 9:30.
The wait is over!
The quest for the Stanley Cup happens here on your home of the Blues. 101 ESPN. 101 ESPN. Sports Center.
STL down by 1 in spring action. Good afternoon. This is Bradford Bruns with your Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Down in Florida at present, Houston leading St. Louis 3-2 in spring training action. Elsewhere, with respect to the Redbirds' developments, Jordan Walker has inflammation in his left knee, will miss 1 week of action. However, no structural damage as confirmed by the skipper earlier today, Ollie Marmol. Pucks tonight on 101 ESPN at 9:30 p.m. St. Louis in Los Angeles. The Kings have dropped 4 in a row, including their most recent game versus Chicago. STL, of course, at 29, 27, and 6, currently 3 points back of that second wild card spot in the Western Conference. The Sports Center update was driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
This is exactly where you want to be listening to us. It's BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN.
According to Katie Wu, the Cardinals are planning for Steven Matz to start this year. Quote, he's looking healthy and effective in Grapefruit League action by going with the veteran rotation, Matz, Gray, Fetty, Michaelis. That's about 4 of the 5 spots. The Cardinals hope to take early pressure off some of their young arms, including Michael McGreevy. The club also feels that utilizing experience is the best strategy to open the season. We should see McGreevy plenty in 2025, but if that's a starter or reliever remains to be seen and is a whole different argument. All of that coming from Katie Wu's piece earlier today, which you can read in its entirety over on The Athletic. She was asked about Steven Matz and the plan to start him over Michael McGreevy potentially. It sure sounds, T-Bone, like as of today, Michael McGreevy is a part of the bullpen and Steven Matz is going to be part of the rotation. How do you feel about that plan?
I don't love it. I still would, if you're going to go youth movement, I would still start McGreevy and I would put Matz into this swing role. And I really don't like the idea of Michael McGreevy going into this like swing man / long relief role for the Cardinals. I think it's better off for him to be just a guy that goes out there, starts every 5th day, and then, you know, eats 150 innings in a season, rather than doing this kind of back and forth yo-yo in between. Because we all know Matz, somebody's going to get hurt at some point. I almost said Matz. It probably will be Matz. I don't like the idea of them doing what they've done with Liberatore for the last couple of years, because that's the first thing that I think of when I hear this role is, oh, yeah, a swing man. He can be the 6th starter. Okay, so he's going to do what Liberatore's done the last couple of years, where it's been mixed results. He's not very good as a starter, but he's been fine when he's just solidified in a bullpen role. I would just go with what we talked about yesterday. I would go McGreevy as your 5th starter, and Matz is the guy that gets pushed to the pin and can be in the swing role mode, because he doesn't impact your future. Right? He's a free agent at the end of the year that you're not going to bring back. He might be more valuable to teams across baseball if he's in the bullpen and is successful there. So I don't like this at all.
I just think it's kind of confusing. It just goes against, once again, what you had said going into the season was your stated goal. You want to win as many games as possible. I get that. I think everybody understands that, at least to a degree. And you want to give the young players as much runway as possible. Well, one of those young players is Michael McGreevy. And what I don't understand, T-Bone, is why they're so hesitant to give him this runway. Michael McGreevy, of all of the young arms, feels like the most stable option. I don't know if he's going to be good at the major league level. I don't know how anybody could tell you definitively one way or the other if he will be. But he looked good in his limited opportunities last year. He's shown you everything you could possibly ask of him down in the minor leagues. He's one of the only guys, I'd be curious to look this up. I might have to do so here in a little bit. He's got to be like at or near the top of the list of innings pitched by minor league pitchers over the last few seasons. He's got to be at the top of that list. He goes out there and he starts like 25 games every single season down in Memphis or Springfield, wherever it's been over the last 3 seasons. So I just don't know what more there is to find out about him. It's time. Now is the time for you to get return on your investment. And now is the time for you to transition Steven Matz to the bullpen. So I don't like this at all. It's really, to me, the one spot that I actually have a problem with their plan going into this season. Everywhere else, I can at least see what the rationale is, what they're doing. But this one is confounding to me. If you want to go with mostly veterans in the rotation, cool. You've got 3 of them. And then Andre Palante is no spring chicken at this point in time. He's already been in the big league roster / rotation for, 3 years now?
Yeah.
So, I mean, he's going to arbitration. Like this is now the time to find at least one of these young guys that can crack into that rotation. And I'm with you on the decision to put McGreevy into the bullpen. That makes no sense to me. If you want a young guy that you can put into the bullpen, Graceffo's probably that guy. I don't see the same with Michael McGreevy. His long-term value to you as an organization is the innings that he pitches as a starter, not the stuff that he brings as a reliever. It is very confusing to me as to why this is their plan heading into the season.
Yeah, and I'm with you. I really don't get it because it would be a different conversation if this was I'll throw Tim Kintz's name out there just because I think he fits what I'm trying to go for here. Like, it's a different conversation if Hintz is going to be on, like, an innings restriction of, like, hey, this guy hasn't really touched 100 innings in his career. If he did get up here, he's probably going to be at, like, 120, and that's, like, pushing it. Like, that would be where I would say, okay, I could get how you get to a point where maybe it's best to start him in the bullpen, limit some of those innings, and then at some point push him into the rotation and just have a veteran eat some of those for the beginning portion of this. McGreevy threw 173 innings last year.
Got my answer to that question, by the way.
Of where it ranked in the minors?
Who had the most innings pitched over in the minors over the last 3 seasons? The answer is Michael McGreevy.
I was going to say, I figured he'd be up there.
He has 447 innings pitched over the last 3 full seasons in the minors. Second best in all of minor league baseball is Luis Palacios, who pitched 400 innings for the Milwaukee Brewers organization. He has pitched basically 50 more innings than the next closest guy in the minors over the last 3 years. It's time, man. It is time. He's made 82 starts over the past 3 seasons. No, there's only one other starting pitcher down in the minors that's 77, and that's the second best. He's had 5 more starts than any other pitcher in minor league baseball. It's time.
Yeah, and like typically what they do with these kind of development curves is they shoot to increase by like 20 to 30 a year. So like if we're going by that, that means he's like should be on pace for 190 to 200 innings this year. Now
he's ready to go. He's
not going to get there, but yeah, he takes over what Michaelis was good at when Michaelis was pitching well and with that like 3 ERA, which was hey, he's going to take the ball every 5th day. He's going to give you about 200 innings in the season, and he's going to have like a 3.5 to 4 ERA. That's McGreevy now. That's no longer Michaelis's role. That's McGreevy's role.
He is what you paid last year Kyle Gibson to be. That is now what Michael McGreevy is here to do. Meanwhile, Steven Matz is the opposite of that. Steven Matz, honestly, is what you paid Lance Lynn to be last year. That's the value that he brings to your rotation. If you have him there, I would rather have the young guy that can potentially be what you had Kyle Gibson to be last year. So it's confusing to me. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It sure sounds like that is their plan heading into the season. We know that can change. An injury immediately changes something like this, but I find it very confusing, and it, to me, is the number one move that goes against everything they said. At least with Arenado, they tried to trade him. They couldn't find a deal. There's really nothing more they can do at this point in time. So, yeah, he's going to start every day, makes your team a little better in doing so potentially, and then you adjust accordingly. I would like to see them put Lars Nootbaar in center field, but especially if Victor Scott's the guy that's starting in center, hey, man, whatever. See what he can do for you in center field. The one spot that just doesn't make any sense is the way they're handling Steven Matz and Michael McGreevy. And it's clear head-to-head. Those are the guys that should be battling for that 5th spot in the rotation. Coming up next, we're hitting the rewind here at BK and Ferrario.
Tune in this Friday from 11 to 2 as BK and Ferrario broadcast live from the E&B Granite Studios at the Centene Community Ice Center. E&B Granite, Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
101 ESPN is powered by Kaufman Townsley St. Louis's injury lawyers. Call 314-500-5000.
They are St. Louis. It's BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. Let's run it back with a daily rewind on BK and Ferrario. Brought to you by Gloria Lou, your home sold guaranteed realty. Selling your home begins at GloriaHasTheBuyers.com.
If you missed anything from today's show, be sure to check it out on the podcast page, 101ESPN.com, and the free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. It's all presented by
Schaefer Door Company.
That 101 ESPN app is easy to use. It is free to download, and it is presented by Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers. Earlier today, we caught up with the former Blues defenseman, Hockey Hall of Famer Chris Pronger. Talked to him about Colton Parayko, the Blues getting the buy-in that they needed over the break. He discussed why he thinks that they will either just stand pat or potentially even buy a little bit at the deadline. So you can find that interview with Prongs and Chris Kerber, the voice of the Blues, over at 101ESPN.com. We do have a little bit of news to pass along from the NFL. Zach Bond was critical to the Eagles winning the Super Bowl this year. He was the linebacker that they had signed previously, was a career special teamer for the New Orleans Saints. Came in, became an All-Pro immediately upon him joining the Eagles, and he's getting a 3-year, $51 million contract with the Eagles. He was set to be a free agent. That will no longer happen. He's getting $34 million guaranteed. So congratulations to Zach Bond for doing one hell of a reset of his value with his one-year deal last year with the Eagles. Last thing that I wanted to get to news-wise, also a trade taking place in the NHL. Did you see this, what the Lightning are doing?
Yeah, 2 first-round picks apparently going to the Kraken for this package.
So it looks like, according to Elliot Friedman, Tampa Bay and Seattle are coming to terms on Olivier Bjorkstrand and Yanni Gourde. Gourde was considered to be one of the top center options available at this year's deadline, so that is potentially going to be gone now. 2 first-round picks, man. Tampa Bay, when they get aggressive,
they go all in.
They do not mess around. They say, okay, this is what we want. This is who we think can fill this need. Let's go get it done right now. We knew they were potentially going to be active based on what they did yesterday on the waiver wire with Cam Atkinson being placed on the waiver wire. It sounds like that is what they're going to potentially be doing for them. So the NHL deadline is starting to ramp up already.
And once again, I mean, you mentioned another top center coming off the board, another guy that Toronto, who they've been looking for a center, now pushes them even more towards desperation mode. That what they will do will be interesting to see if they end up, because they're the one team, like we've talked about. I think Army's going to stand pat at the deadline. I do think he'll be listening on teams, calls on Braden Shen. Toronto's the one team that Alex has brought it up. They could be the one that gets desperate enough that does make that offer that Army just can't refuse.
Blues back in action this evening. They're going to be taking on the LA Kings. Final game that they'll play prior to this year's NHL trade deadline. Puck drop for this one coming up at 9:30. Woo, it's a late one on that West Coast. Pre-game starts at 8:30. We're hoping Alex will be here for that. We'll see, though. Game time decision for Alex Ferrario tonight for that pre-game show. Feeling a little bit under the weather today. T-Bone, how much, if at all, do you think tonight's game plays into what Doug Armstrong is going to do at this year's deadline?
I don't think it impacts his decision at all. I think this team has proven, at minimum, they are worth, or has proven that they are worth just standing pat. I think he will field calls, but I don't think anything that happens tonight will dictate whether or not he ends up trading a Braden Shen or anything. I think he's just going to do his job. He's going to listen, see what offers are out there. If there's something that he really likes, whether that's an addition or making a trade of Braden Shen that helps them for the here and the long term, I think then he makes it happen. But for the most part, I think nothing about tonight's game determines their path at the deadline.
That's where I'm at as well. I think they've done enough since that Four Nations face-off, but really even dating back to like that Utah game. In the month of February, I think they've done enough to convince Doug Armstrong this team is worth either sticking with the group that got us here or adding just a little bit. And I do agree with Prongs. I don't think that this is going to be like a top 6 forward or top 4 defenseman. No doubt about it. Top 4 defenseman that comes in. I think if you add, it's a nice winger that can come in on that third line and potentially give you a little bit more of a scoring punch, or a third line center that maybe even was playing on the fourth line for another team, but can come in here and just give you a little bit more juice than what you've been able to get out of Oscar Sundqvist. that's the kind of addition that if they're going to make one, I think maybe Army goes out there and makes. I don't have a name for you. Hopefully Alex will have that for you guys tomorrow as we do potentially, if he's able to be here, a Tender Thursday here on BK and Ferrario. Last thing to get to, Mizzou back in action this evening. They're going to be taking on Oklahoma on the road. OU is in desperation mode. They are 4-12 in the SEC, but as of today, they're kind of right on that bubble because of the quality wins that they have. Arizona, Louisville, Michigan, Mississippi State, Vandy, all 5 wins for them, quad 1 wins. As of today, I think they probably would be in the NCAA tournament. Beating Mizzou gives them a no-doubt resume where they are absolutely into the tournament. I think the Tigers win this one. They're about a 5-point favorite on the road. T-Bone, what do you think happens in this one on the road at Norman tonight?
I think Mizzou bounces back. I think they end up covering that spread. I think they win by double digits. I think they put more questions in. I don't know if questions is the right word, but they're not going to allow Oklahoma to solidify their resume for the tournament tonight.
I think Mark Mitchell goes for a 32 spot tonight.
32 points?
Hey, 25 last time, then career high. I'm just saying the way in which he has
32 felt aggressive, Bradford.
Okay, the way in which he has been demanding the ball down low. You run that offense. BK, we've talked about it. You run it through him, and then everybody else is complimentary, although you want to see them do a better job, much better job on the offensive glass.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing that I'm going to be monitoring. What does it look like tonight underneath? Is this a bounce-back performance potentially for Josh Gray after he has had a couple of rough performances? One, just not great, and the other was because of foul trouble in their form. They need him to be better if they're going to be able to go on a run in this year's tournament. We'll talk about all of that tomorrow here on the show. For Tanner Hendrickson and Bradford Bruns, shout out to him for coming in a pinch. I'm Brandon Kiley. Enjoy the podcast. Enjoy the Fast Lane that's coming up today. We will talk to you guys tomorrow on the Fast Lane, or on 101 ESPN.
101 ESPN has your chance to win free tickets to see Lainey Wilson
In a 4x4 Bayou, from the Bayou to
on October 16th at Hollywood Casino Amphitheater.